of the Sonoma City Council and the Sonoma City Council as a successor agency to the dissolved Sonoma Community Development Agency. So at this time, we'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. And Mark Bramford, as our honored guest, would you please start the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, City Clerk?
Councilmember Agramonte.
Here.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley.
Here.
Councilmember Cook.
Here.
Mayor Gallion.
Present. So with that, we're going to go ahead and entertain comments from the public. And at this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, matters represented or presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. And upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name and your address. So at this time, would anyone wish to make public comment? Please step forward.
Hello, Jack Wagner, 270 West Napa Street, apartment 9. I finally found a single resident apartment that is under $1,000 in the city limits of Sonoma. It only took me 4 years knowing both the tenant moving out and the owner of the property and just magical timing. And that's from someone who was born and raised here and has lived here. And, you know, this opportunity isn't really available for people. Also, I just want to, I did win my public election on the primary for the Sonoma County Green Party County Council. So we did have a public ballot for our steering committee, and I came in 4th out of 9, the highest ranked male, way above it was all women and one guy at the end and me in the middle. So I hope that means something good. But I go through the thrift stores and just pick out a bunch of books. And when I find stuff like on business, I'll grab it, 50 cents. And usually there's something relative toward city planning and governing in there. And this book's just about Generation Y and making your businesses accessible to it and making the area where their businesses are at somewhere where they want to go, which is very relative to our city being somewhere where we want Gen Y, Gen Xers to go, which now are really no longer the youth. That's really just the adult population. And so we need to have an infrastructure open to that. What I've been saying is, 30-year-old men don't need to be sharing bathrooms, and single women don't need to be going on Craigslist to find places to live. Shared housing is great for a lot of people, but if that's the only opportunity, it's really not making it accessible for the people that, the diversity of people we want living here. So we need market rate housing for singles, for couples. A couple could live where I'm at. It'd be more than enough room. Families, along with all the affordable housing and subsidized affordable housing projects. Technically, this is affordable housing. It's about 1/3 of what my income is, which is what the HUD definition is, where it isn't, the same as the state definition, is where that term kind of gets confusing with a lot of people. But yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I think that should be a major priority. I think that's something to give direction to the commission, planning commission for, and to really hold more the projects that are coming up to add to that pool of housing, that housing stock. So thank you guys.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hello, I'm Cecilia Ponison, Ponicisan. I live in Sonoma on France Street, and I'd like to bring to your attention the way our public schools are protecting our children. The very successful Sonoma School Garden Program is now completely organic. They use no pesticides, and they never use toxic equipment, either in the gardens or on the school grounds. They kill weeds with a mixture of vinegar and water, which the founder of this program, Kathleen Hill, has introduced to the students. This is working so successfully that some of the groundskeepers, the head groundskeepers at local elementary schools, are using the same formula on the school grounds. We, as a community, are fortunate that we have dedicated school maintenance employees who are very much in tune with the value of a healthy campus for our children. Roundup is a chemical made by Monsanto and found to be a probable carcinogen by the World Health Organization. Its main ingredient, glyphosate, is more and more being prohibited by cities, some states, and foreign countries. In a recent article in the Index Tribune, the group Moms Across America tested 10 wines from Napa, Sonoma, and Mendocino. All 10 samples were found to contain glyphosate. As a caring community, we should consider making our environment in Sonoma healthier for ourselves and for the pollinators we need for our gardens and for agriculture. Glyphosate has an extremely negative effect on honeybees and butterflies. Last year, the White House released its first national strategy to promote the health of honeybees and other pollinators because of the huge drop in their numbers. This document stressed the importance of increased research on the effects of pesticides and establishing larger areas of good quality habitat for pollinators such as bee and butterfly gardens. It just makes sense to stop using toxic chemicals in our soil. We should all follow the good example of the school garden project. And one more thing that you might like to know is that the summer upkeep of the gardens is done by families who sign up for a week or so. And then they get to take whatever veggies are ripe during their week. All of the plants and the materials for the gardens are donated. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Burgode, 240 Del Rio Paseo. As you know, we have a new mobile home rent control ordinance adopted earlier this year. And at that time, the council did indicate that they would revisit the issue to provide some guidelines for some of the regulations, flesh out some of the details, and that was a commitment by the city council. And now that it appears we're going to be having a new city manager, I think it's appropriate to offer that new city manager the benefit of not stepping into a complete vacuum when they if and when the next manager of these mobile home parks comes in and starts asking for rent increases. I think it's something that that we ought to make sure we revisit and not forget about that commitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Anyone else wishing to speak on public comment? If not, I'll go ahead and close that. Let's go ahead. Does anyone have any specific meeting dedications? All right, well, seeing none, I really do feel that we skipped our week that we normally would be here, and I would like to just propose a moment of silence for the people who are involved as family members for the Orlando incident. We've not had the opportunity to actually do that, and I feel that respectfully as a city, and certainly one that holds that philosophy near and dear to our hearts, that we would go ahead and respect that. So I'll ask for a moment of silence. All right, thank you very much. Now I'm going to go ahead and ask certain members to do presentations. This is going to be recognition of the service of members of the Mobile Home Park Rental Review Board. So I'll go ahead and just ask you to come up, and I'm going to do that from the floor here. Do I have any other members of the Mobile Home Park Board that might have come in after? All right, good enough. Then I would just like to recognize them by name if they're not here. So we have Nancy Parmalee, who served for 23 years. We have Dean Moser, who served for 20 years. Then we have Bill Darden, who served for 16 years. All right. I'll say a little bit more after I give them all out. Okay, and then we have Mark Bramfett, who served for 13 years. There we go. I have Bill Dillard for 3 years. David Artson for 3 years. There we go. And then I have David Brigode for 3 years. So this is quite a commitment, and for some of you, a lot more years than others. And I just wanted to say that this has been certainly some trying times through the history of the mobile home park. And your service, your dedication, being there for the residents that occupy them and representing them has been certainly an honor. And to go ahead and say now that, you know, we are retiring that method as, you know, part of the process, just know that you have made history and you are a legacy in the annals of Sonoma, especially in your mobile home parks. So I just wanted to say on behalf of the council, thank you to each of you for your service. And if you'd like to say a word or two, please step up to the microphone.
Yes, I'm Bill Darden, and it was a heartfelt pleasure to serve on this board. We didn't meet a whole lot, but when we did, we made sure that we did the best for the community and for the citizens that live in the mobile home parks in Sonoma. So I want to thank you for this recognition. Thank you.
I just want to thank the council members for having the insight and guts to do a very difficult job, because I know that this ordinance was not simple and had a lot to learn in order to be able to approve it. So I want to thank you folks very much. I want to thank the staff of the city, who did a remarkable job also. And thank you all, and God bless you all.
Thank you. And thank you again for your collaboration with us on the new process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so now we're going to come to our consent calendar in agenda order for City Council. So all items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Council members. Any withdrawals, requests? All right, with that, I will open it up to the public. Public?
Hi, I'm Fred Ollenbach, 19550 8th Street East, and I would like to remove 4B and 4D for separate action, please. Thank you.
4B is in boy and 4D as in David, is that correct? Anyone else wishing to make any further comments? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to council for motion or action.
I'd like to,
Okay,
whatever your name
Mayor
is.
Pro Tem Agramonte?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion from the consent agenda to approve 4A, 4C, 4E, 4F, 4G, 4H, 4I, 4J, and 4K, as it was decided to pool items 4B and 4D.
And Councilmember Cook?
I'll second.
Okay, do we have any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll go for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Gallion.
Aye, so with that, we have full consensus passing the motion to adopt for A, C, D, I'm sorry, not D, E, F, G, H, I, J, and K. And that is 5-0. So now we'll come back, and will the member of the public, Mr. Allerbach, please step forward?
For 4B, I wanted to mention about the 523 goal setting meeting. The minutes say that Carla Noyes and Fred Allebach spoke briefly. But Carla was not there. I was the only one at the time of public comment. I know that that was also confirmed by 2 city council members. Carla confirmed that she was not there, but she did send an email comment, and other people sent an email comment, but they weren't noted as speaking at the meeting. So I'd like to have the minutes be corrected to state what happened there. And then
We'll just do one motion at a time. Okay? So, all right, it's anyone wishing to make any requests or further questions of Mr. Allerbach? All right, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, let's bring it back. All right. Okay, we can come there. All right, so then at this point, I would need a motion to approve or recommend. Yes, Councilmember Hundley?
Motion to approve item 4B with the suggested changes.
And who will second that motion?
Second.
We have Councilmember Cook seconding. Do we need any further clarification? All right, then let's do roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Mayor Gallion.
Aye, so that's a 5-0 to go ahead and correct that notation. Mr. Allerbach, you're up for 4D.
I'd also like to correct that there's no R in my last name.
Is that me? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's the heat. It's the heat. That is the minutes of the goal-setting session.
And for the minutes in this packet, in item 7D of these minutes, I just wanted to clarify that the critical point of the CSEC's Climate Action 2020 recommendation to the council was to bring local measures of greenhouse gas reductions up to 10% from 2%, not to adopt all the local measures. And I think the minutes failed to make the distinction that I really wanted to make in that comment, that it was not that the council would adopt all the local measures, but that the council would bring the local measures up to 10% from 2% to be at the same level as other small cities in the county. So I didn't see that in the minutes, that the gist of that comment was in there. So that's what I wanted to correct for that.
I do have a question on that. Does staff concur that that's what we did? Or maybe, Gay, do you remember?
Excuse me, that was the gist of what he said, and I would be happy to make that correction to the minutes if council so moved.
Okay. So we have clarification that that is suggested. Do we have any further questions of Mr. Allerbach? Okay. Given that we don't, I'll go out to public comment for any comments on that item. Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing none, bring it back to council for motion or action.
Oopsie. Move.
Mayor Pro Tem Agravante.
Move to approve item 4D with the changes suggested.
No, it's
Is
the
it-
wrong item. It's 7.
Oh,
7 in what date of minutes?
Yeah, I think we had just a tidge of confusion with regard to this item because I think perhaps the council thought that only all of the comments about the minutes were being made to start with. And so you actually moved and seconded and approved 4B. The speaker had multiple minutes corrections to make. So,
So with
yeah,
that,
I just perhaps rescind the first motion and start over with the second set of corrections.
okay, so we will rescind the first motion, making it May 23rd as the first motion? Because the goal-setting session was May 23rd?
You can either do that, or since you've already tacitly approved the May 23rd changes, you can order these changes and then approve all of item 4B as amended.
Okay. So we've gone ahead and we've listened to the correction. So at this point, we should have a motion that reflects all of the minutes. So,
And I will do that.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I will make offer my motion to correct the information that we've just been given.
For item 4B.
4B.
Okay, and is that sufficient, council?
I apologize, always forget to push the button. And you're also moving the approval of the minutes, all of the minutes as corrected. Is that correct?
Yes, to include all of the minutes
Perfect.
as corrected. Thank you.
Then we need a second.
Second.
Councilmember Cook is the second. We will go ahead, and is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's go for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Gallion?
Aye, so that is the correction of the minutes incorporated within 4B, and that is a 5-0 vote. Okay, now we are up for item 4D, as in David.
Say my name again.
Yes.
Fred Hollebach, 19550 8th Street East. And I just have a few questions about the RFP, and I'm not sure what the name of this type of firm is, so I refer to it as a headhunting firm. So I guess that's common enough usage. So I wondered if this consent calendar item the end of possible public comment on hiring a new city manager, and when would the public have an opportunity to participate in this process, and will there be comment after the choice of a headhunting firm? Will this come back to the council where the public will have anything more to say? If so, this would be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on what duties and qualities a city manager should have. From number 3 on the RFP, it says that the headhunting firm should include, quote, a proposed process to assist the council in identifying what the council and the community believe are important in a city manager. The RFP agenda item also says once a firm is hired, they will work with the city manager and their council on process, recruitment, and selection. So the process seems to include and leave out the public input all at the same time. So I'm wondering, how will the council know what the community thinks is important here, and how will the public know what criteria will be used for selection?
Okay, and I do believe I will let the city manager answer that, since today I had a very lengthy discussion with her about that process.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Galligan. Through the mayor, basically, when you go out for an RFP, you're seeking firms that will come back and make a proposal on suggested methods. This will, once you receive those RFPs, this will all come back to the council, and then the council will, and the city manager will work with that firm and determine there are several processes that can be undertaken depending on what the council wishes to do. So what you're doing with this RFP is reaching out to recruitment firms and asking for what they consider to be types of successful processes that have been utilized. So this is not a one-stop, once-only look. What you're looking for is the firm that you wish to work with in defining the process. This is only the first step in the process. From there, you will work with the recruitment firm and you will help define for them what process you wish to take, how much public input and community input you will utilize, what process you will utilize to vet the candidates and interview the candidates. There is any number of processes that can be utilized. So no, this is definitely not this is just the first step in the process, but you have to get a recruiter on board and then determine. You also have in the municipal code the definition of the city manager, what the duties and responsibilities are. So those are already determined. So this is just the first step in the process. It is not the definition of the process. So the action tonight is to give myself as city manager the authority to go out and seek bids, if you will, or proposals from qualified firms that wish to submit a proposal to the council, and this will come back to the council, and this just starts the process.
Thank you. Does council have any further questions? Okay, so with that, I would go ahead and I would still open it up to the public for further comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this particular item?
Chris Petlock, 426 Napa Road. I have a suggestion. Why don't you start with an ad in a local paper? See if you can garner some good applicants from around the community. We have a lot of highly educated people that live here in Sonoma or in surrounding areas. I'm sure you could find yourself a nice handful of resumes of people that would love the position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right. Seeing no other comments on this, I will go ahead and bring it back to council for motion or action. Councilmember Cook?
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item 4D on the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a first by Councilmember Cook. We have a second by Councilmember Edwards. So at this point, is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Huntley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Gallion?
It's an aye, and so with that, there is a 5-0 vote to go ahead and authorize the city manager to issue a request for proposal for professional services for city manager recruitment. And with that, that brings us to the conclusion of the consent agenda, consent calendar and agenda order for the city council. We now have consent calendar, agenda order, city council as successor agency. So we have one item. Any questions of staff on that item? All right, going out to the public. Anyone else wishing to speak on that? Bring it back to council for action or motion. Councilmember Hundley.
I'd like to make a motion to approve all of the portions of the minutes of the May 23rd, June 6th, and June 9th, 2016 city council meetings pertaining to the successor agency.
And do we need to make any of those amendments on those minutes, just as a point of question? No.
Not unless the corrections pertain to the successor agency sections.
Okay. All right,
I'll
then I'll
second.
look for a second. All right. Being that we have a first, we have a second, do we need any further discussion? And I did go out to public. Okay, all right. So I will go ahead and call for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Gallion?
Aye, so that means 5-0, passing of the minutes of those dates, item 5A. So we are now to our public hearing, which will be on the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding the adoption of the fiscal year 2016-17 operating and capital budget for the city of Sonoma and the Sonoma Successor Agency. And that will be both city manager and finance director, and we'll go ahead and let city manager start.
Thank you, Mayor Gallion, members of the City Council. On June 9th, the council held a budget workshop to review the proposed budget for the city and the successor agency. The workshop provided the opportunity for department managers to present a detailed overview to the City Council of the budgets they manage and to discuss both accomplishments from the prior fiscal year and their goals for fiscal year 16-17. The dialogue with city management staff gave the council a clear understanding of the year ahead and the dynamics of the future economy. The city's operating and capital budget is one of the most important decisions that the council makes during the year. The annual budget is a policy document which sets the financial course for the city of Sonoma and defines the service priorities provided to the community. In the words of Mayor Gallion at the workshop, and if I may quote you, I thought this was brilliant, "This is not a wish list, this is a to-do list." I wrote that down, and I will keep that quote forever. It provides for the prudent management of annual revenues and expenses. This budget was prepared based on council goals on fiscal management, which calls for the city to maintain high-level fiscal accountability that ensures short and long-term sustainability of the city's fiscal position and to provide for effective and efficient management of local taxpayer dollars. The budget presented tonight for your consideration meets that goal. This budget also reinvests in infrastructure, maintains core public responsibilities, and provides employees with the tools and equipment to deliver the services to our citizens in the most cost-effective way. Reflecting on the past several years, the city has seen a healthy economy with significant gains in major revenue sources. This is mainly due to the vibrant tourism and real estate market. But what staff began to see in 2015-16 was a leveling off of the economy indicators, and we anticipate that to continue in 2016-17. Therefore, projections for revenue growth have been set conservatively and will need to be monitored closely throughout the next fiscal year. Should the state and national economists be correct, when the next recession wave hits, predicted for 2017-18, the city will have maintained its solvent financial position, especially considering we are a tourist-based economy and rely on our major revenue sources such as TOT and sales tax. Just as the council goals provide a roadmap for staff for work priorities, the budget provides the comprehensive detail and transparency of the internal operations of this organization. To that end, certain areas of the budget document have been modified or added to provide greater transparency. Highlights in this budget document include, number one, in the beginning of the budget document, we've added an expanded opening narrative, including graphs which include a comprehensive overview of the city's financial position. This can be utilized by the public as a quick read of the budget without going into the deeper details. Number two, we have reorganized the community activities budget, which can be found under account 100-43101, and we moved all external city-supported functions and activities into this department. This will give a clearer picture of all the contributions the city makes to the community character by highlighting contributions and support of various organizations and functions. Most of these are not new expenditures, but have been accounted for in different accounts throughout the prior years. Because we are celebrating and designating the Year of Community Character, it seemed like a great time to bring this to the forefront. Number three, employee benefits. One other area that deserves noting is the city's position with regards to employee benefit obligations. The city has been proactive for several years in prudently managing employee benefits and long-term liabilities to the extent available at the local level. The city is at the lowest tier for CalPERS retirement for city employees and negotiated into city contracts that employees began paying their employee portion of the employee rate before the required state-imposed deadline of 2018. The employees are also paying an additional 1% of the city's employer rate. Number four, in 2012, the city issued a pension obligation bond to pay off a portion of the CalPERS liability in a shorter period of time. This results in an interest savings from the CalPERS interest rate plus a defeasance of a portion of the city's unfunded liability. Number 5, on the health benefits side, the city has had a maximum cap on health benefits in place for approximately 8 years, which has kept health benefits rates level. More importantly, prudent decisions by prior administration and the council disallowed retiree health benefits, so the city has no obligation for future retirees, which is also known as OPEB liability. Added to the budget for the first full year in 2016-17 is the Special Events Manager and the Code Enforcement Officer, both of which are programs that were approved to enhance responsiveness and services to the community. These programs are contract positions and are not based on full-time equivalents. The outcomes that we've seen in the short term have been excellent, and no changes are proposed during the fiscal year. Just as an update, in July, we will actually have a presentation by our city prosecutor's office on the code enforcement program. So I think you'll be very pleased with the outcomes to date on the code enforcement. So on behalf of the entire city staff, I'm pleased to submit the fiscal year 2016-17 operating and capital budget to the City Council for final consideration and adoption. You have before you a fully balanced budget for the City of Sonoma and the Sonoma Successor Agency for fiscal year 2016-17 for all city funds in the amount of $31,381,211. After consideration of all department requests and measurement against available revenue, the general fund reflects a slight increase of 0.03%. This increase is due to a slight increase in our successor agency, and the budget focuses towards accomplishing core services and council goals, as well as funding community-sponsored activities. The budget does not anticipate any growth in core expenditure levels. So this is just a brief overview from the manager level of the areas contained in the 16-17 budget. And before I turn the rest of this presentation over to our finance director, Deanna Hilbrantz, I just have a couple other comments that I'd like to make. I want to acknowledge every department manager and every staff member for their hard work and dedication in putting this budget together, and most notably Deanna, who provided exemplary leadership in this year's budget development. Collectively and individually, all employees on a daily basis are very prudent in spending taxpayers' dollars. This staff, the best that I have ever worked with, is always looking for a better, more efficient way to do the job, and I'm so proud to lead this stellar organization. So unless you have any questions at this time for me directly, I will ask Deanna to proceed with the rest of the presentation on a summary basis of the budget, and I thank you for allowing me to present this budget tonight. Very proud of the document, very proud of the organization, and very proud of the services that we present and provide to this community. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll continue on.
Okay, so I will provide you with a brief overview. We went into a lot of detail on June 9th. So if there are questions that we want to go into more detail, Carol and I are happy to provide some answers. As Carol noted, and as we discussed at the workshop, we wanted to make this a bit more of an educational document about the city. So I won't go into a lot of detail on the profile. I'm sure we're all familiar with the city itself. But it is worth noting that in April, the State Employment Development Department reported that unemployment in Sonoma County is approximately 3.8%, which is the lowest level since 2006. Well, that's a very optimistic figure. We are still very conservative in our revenue targets because our revenue is such a tourism-based and economically sensitive revenue source. So again, this will be a high-level overview, reflecting quite a bit on our revenue sources. Again, we thrive on a tourism-based economy. We've seen a vibrant recovery from the recession and the economic downturn. but the continual incline we were seeing is really leveling out. So we are still seeing growth in revenue, but it's at a much flatter level. So for example, where we were seeing 10% growth in TOT revenue, after the TID was implemented, we're now looking at perhaps 2%. We were significantly impacted by the dissolution of the Community Development Agency, and Measure J was approved in 2012, and while it's not provided the same amount of annual revenue as the Community Development Agency, it's been a significant source to maintain service levels and continue to maintain our capital infrastructure, streets primarily, and other facilities. That being said, that measure expires June 30th of this year. So we'll be talking a little bit more about it this evening and looking for a direction in terms of your direction in terms of renewal of that measure. The primary types of expense for the city is services and supplies. Many cities, their primary expense is in salary and benefits, but we contract the most expensive services, or which is police and fire, public safety is contracted. So our city reflects a much higher level of services and supplies cost and a lower salary and benefits cost than similar cities. You'll also be looking at approving a number of separate funds that are maintained by the city with a total budget of, again, $31,381,210. Overall, it's a slight decrease over all of the funds, but the general fund has a slight increase. As Carol reflected, we have some overall changes. So there were some slight salary increases taking effect. They'll take place midway through the year, so overall it's a 1.5% increase. But these employees are also paying an additional share of their PERS, the employer share of PERS. So while the city's payroll share of CalPERS reports as an increase from CalPERS, it's actually decreasing because of the employee chipping in the share. There is what's called an unfunded liability, which is paid separately, and that's an amount calculated by PERS. We pay that for our miscellaneous, which is our standard employee at the city, as well as for public safety, even though we no longer have those employees. And as Carol reflected, we are maintaining health insurance because we have a fixed contribution to employee health insurance costs. We are not suffering as other agencies are with large benefit increases. We pay a fixed share per employee based on whether they're single, couple, or family insurance. But if the costs rise from the insurance providers, that's borne by the employee. So the general fund is the largest fund in the city budget. The proposed budget for fiscal 16-17 is $17,010,424. Again, an increase of about 0.3%. And the primary source of the increase is a change in legislation related to this assessor agency. So previously, legal costs related to the former Community Development Agency were paid using redevelopment property tax trust funds. So they weren't impacting the general fund. And that has, through legislation, that has changed. And so those will be paid out of the general fund, any legal costs associated to the Community Development Agency. This is a balanced budget. There are no excess revenues over expenses. There is no additional funds going to reserve and no drawdown from reserves. Any increases are anticipated. Each department, as Carol noted, all departments worked really hard, but they looked at every cost in their books. And so many departments actually reduced their budgets just by taking a deep look at what they've got in their budget, what they've spent over the past year and the years before. Our dominant revenue sources are transient occupancy tax, property tax, and sales tax, which includes Measure J. Again, Measure J was approved in 2012 but is sunsetting. So as directed in the 2015-16 goals, we'll be initiating efforts this evening to begin formulating the election cycle for renewal of Measure J, if that is council direction. Tax dollars from Measure J have been about $2.2 million annually. So again, the top three revenue sources, TOT, sales tax, property tax, are over 50%. In fact, they're over 80% of discretionary revenue. Many of those are very subject to economic fluctuations. We've been in an extended economic recovery, and that's something the state is noting as well in their budget projections. There's a little bit of cautious concern. While we're not seeing declines yet, we're seeing declines in growth, but not specific declines in revenue. There's some caution that needs to be exercised. We don't know when something might happen. Projections currently are looking at about 18 months out. The other revenues that are not considered discretionary are user fees, which are really tied to the cost of services. We charge fees based on actual cost of service, so they're not just an arbitrary number. Transfers, so we'll transfer between funds for cost shares, or for example, to the general fund transfers to other funds to support those funds. Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund provides a reimbursement for some administrative activities. And we also have grants primarily related to capital projects, but occasionally for some other activities. Again, we noted growth in our primary revenue sources is declining. And with general fund revenue coming from those primary sources and a declining growth, we've had to be really cautious in our projections. So transient occupancy tax is our highest source of revenue, and TOT is 10% of revenue based on hotel revenue. So as hotels, even if their occupancy is high, if they're fluctuating their rates, the TOT can change at the same time. In addition to the TOT, there's a 2% TID charge. That is delivered to the Tourism Improvement District and used for marketing Sonoma as a tourism destination, and does not sit in the city's funds. It's distributed out to those to that group. The sales tax in the city of Sonoma is 8.75%. The city receives 1% as local sales tax and 0.5% from Measure J. There's a lot of system and legislative differences in how those are calculated and submitted. So while one would project that a half-cent sales tax should be about half as much money as a 1% sales tax, it doesn't work like that. But much in our favor in that Measure J is more than half of our sales tax. In fiscal 14 and 15, sales tax grew at about 4% per year. For 16, it's projected at 1%. So we're near the end of the year and only seeing about a 1% growth. Measure J is actually anticipated to decline from 2015 to 2016. And so we are still forecasting a little bit of growth, but it's growth from the decline. And again, it is scheduled to expire. So the remaining sales tax is distributed primarily to the state, some to the county or for specific measures. For example, there's public safety sales tax. 94% of that goes to the county, and 6% is distributed to the cities. And there's also Measure M, which is used for roads projects, and we receive a portion of that as well. The city receives approximately 18 cents of every property tax dollar. The remainder, primarily about 40%, is to school districts, and 30% to the Sonoma County General Fund are the primary recipients of property tax dollars. So again, our other revenue sources, a next high revenue source is user fees, licenses, permits, forfeitures, and rent. Again, those are based on actual costs of services. So it is the city's policy that the public at large should not subsidize activities of private interest through general tax revenues. And we do review fees on an annual basis, and we expect to do that sometime this calendar year. Most recent fee review was for January, so it was done, I believe, in November for January 1st of 2016. And again, it is sometimes, as you know, sometimes challenging. Some payers of fees are not comfortable with the idea of paying fees, and we appreciate your recognition of the importance of those fees. Without fees, then there's less discretionary revenue to pay for services such as public safety or streets maintenance that is difficult to assign to a specific user. Another area of revenue is business license tax, and we've really stepped up enforcement this year and are now using the code enforcement officer and the city prosecutor to continue to enforce that tax. Franchise tax is collected from businesses providing services to city residents, such as cable. electricity, telephone service, and garbage. And we're also seeing strong performance, but again, an economically sensitive revenue source. As people have financial challenges, those are the types of things that they cut back on. In 2016, over $400,000 was anticipated in grants and reimbursement revenue. For 2017, only about $70,000 is anticipated. That is typically offset by a reduction in capital projects, as they're typically capital grants, but it is a change in revenue. As we've implemented our new financial system and really become better at using it and done more timely reconciliation, we're able to better project how much funds we have from this year left over to put into next year's budget. And so we have projected about $600,000 is available from this year unspent funds or excess revenue that's available to fund next year's budget. Are there any questions I can answer on revenue before I continue?
I'm good.
Okay. So general fund expenses. The general fund budget includes administration, which is city council, city clerk, city manager, finance, city attorney, successor agency administration, and non-departmental. Public safety, police and fire, development services, planning and building, public works and capital projects, community activities, and transfers. The general fund also supports both the gas tax fund and the cemetery fund, each of which have historically had insufficient operating revenue to meet their expenses. And since 2012, the council has adopted a policy to transfer sufficient funds so that their budgets are balanced each year. The deficit in the gas tax has been resolved. It is now as long as it's funded each year and balanced each year, it is not going into further deficit and does not have a deficit. The cemetery fund continues to have a significant deficit of about $1.6 million in cash. So the gas tax fund is a special revenue fund. It is taxes delivered by the state to the city, and it accounts for street-related expenses, including personnel, street sweeping, engineering, pavement and sidewalk maintenance, and capital projects. This fund is non-self-sustaining for a number of reasons. The state has lowered the level of gas tax funding. There's lower gas prices and also increased use of lower fuel vehicles, such as electric vehicles. So again, the general fund has been making transfers to sustain that fund. For 2016, 2017, the proposed transfer is $401,805. The city maintains two enterprise funds, the cemetery and water. And enterprise funds are used to account for operations that are financial and operated in a manner similar to private business enterprise, where the intent of the governing body is that the cost of providing goods or services are financed or recovered primarily through user charges. What's different from private enterprise is there's no profit. We have to calculate all of our fees based on actual costs. You all participated in our fee study in 2014 for the water system, or many of you did, in our fee study. And so we pass through the actual costs of services for all fees. So the water budget is based on the adopted 2014 water rate study, with a change made this year because the rate of Sonoma County Water Agency has increased by 6% when it was projected at 4%. We continue to monitor the water fund to assure that conservation efforts are not causing issues on the revenue side, that we will continue to maintain a strong water system on a capital side and a financial side. The cemetery fund accounts for maintenance and operation of the mountain, valley, and veteran cemeteries. Operational revenues are generated through site sales, burial costs, and lettering charges. Expenses result from activities related to burials, maintenance of existing plots and landscaping, brush clearing, weed abatement, litter, and utilities. Again, the cemetery fund remains in a cash deficit position of approximately $1.6 million. This is the first year that the cemetery fund has not required a general fund transfer to balance. I was hopeful in this year that we would be able to make a transfer from the general fund to start to attack the deficit, but our budget was very tight this year, so we'll be looking at that in the future. Some of the other funds you'll be approving are the successor agency to the former Community Development Agency, and that is primarily submitted to the State Department of Finance for approval of payments of bonds and some other minor contracts. We have internal service funds, including the Vehicle Replacement Fund, the Long-Term Building Maintenance Fund, the Management Information Systems Fund, and also our insurance and benefits funds. Finally, we have debt service funds. We have our pension obligation bond and our Krebs bond, clean renewable energy bonds, which were used for the solar panels at the police department and public works. So we went into a very detailed review of expenses at the workshop, and I'll just highlight a few areas, the most significant changes. In the legal area, we have an increase primarily related to the establishment of the code enforcement officer position. In successor agency, as I noted previously, there's an increase because the city has taken on some additional administrative or legal costs that were previously included in our trust fund reimbursements. And in community activities, the city has transferred a number of costs from other areas and also experienced some increases. So we've included the cost of the Sebastiani Theater at about $90,000 per year. The Visitors Bureau, which was paid from redevelopment funds, is no longer, that contract expired, and so the city has to absorb that contract at $100,000. And we've increased the community fund grant program about $6,500 and added a special events coordinator. Corresponding with this budget, you'll be approving the capital improvement plan, which was presented to you at the workshop. And in conclusion, the City of Sonoma is a leader in providing a high quality of life for its residents and business, and it supports a community where people can live, work, and play. These efforts are guided and enhanced through the proposed 2016-2017 operating and capital budget. Sound budgeting practices allow the city to maintain our streets and roads, keep our parks beautiful, contribute to local nonprofit services, and provide public safety and emergency medical services. This budget addresses the need to continue to focus on sustainability of our water system and conservation, evaluate housing policies, and move forward with climate protection policies. It is reflective of the leadership of the council set through the adoption of the 2016-17 council goals and provides the work plan for the stellar staff of the city who will carry forth and complete the ideals reflected in this budget. With that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Quite a comprehensive overview. And that's a marker probably for at least 5 hours into the discussion on the budget for this year after preparation. So, again, my accolades to staff for all that they have done, and certainly reducing it down to just this format and not a midnight exercise. So, council members, do you have any questions, comments of staff?
I do.
Yes,
Thank
Mayor
you.
Pro Tem Agravante.
Thank you. One thing I'm happy about, of course, the discussion of, for the city council in our budget for a retreat or a leadership, program of some kind. I think that's really valuable since 3 of us are new, in spite of the fact that we have backgrounds that bring different experiences. I think it would be great to understand what we bring to this council. The second thing, of course, is I see that the staff recommends the consideration of any use of reserves to be held in abeyance until staff returns with the update of the city's reserves. And I know that was something that was up for discussion. And of course, you are now adhering to the new government accounting standards, which I think is a healthy thing for the people of Sonoma. I don't know if others have received requests regarding the appeals fees, probably decreasing them. And while I respect that question, me personally, I have to actually look at the history of the appeal fees, as well as the process and how these numbers came to be. So I've heard what people have said, but I still think it's important for me to understand this. And the other thing I said, Deanna, when we were in this, the R word, reconciliation, is fantastic because it brings fear to nonprofits, reconciliation, because it's really hard. It sounds simple, but it takes a lot of hard work to do. So I really appreciate the time that you and your staff have put into this. So I thank you. Thank you.
Any questions, further questions of staff or comment? Because if not, then I will go ahead and put it out to the public for the public's comment. All right? I'm going to open up public comment on the budget. And this is part of the public hearing.
Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. I'd like to ask a question about unfunded pension liabilities or obligations. To what extent is this a serious issue in future city finances? It seems like the county and the state are in seriously deep water with this issue, and I just wonder where the city is with that same issue. Is it the same? And as I was making some notes here, I realized that a public servant's pension shouldn't be called a liability, because that's part of the deal of being a public servant, is that you have a pension. And so I don't feel like calling that a liability, but at the same time, if the city doesn't have enough revenue to pay for it, I was just curious in simple terms, does the city have a problem with this like the county or the state, or does the city have this handled?
Thank you for your question. I'll go to staff to answer.
I'll start with the question. It's called a liability. It's a liability for the city because the city has a commitment to make those payments on behalf of employees. So it's not a liability to the employee, but to the city. Because the city has taken some actions, there are agencies in significant trouble with pensions. Many of them, for example, have retiree medical benefits. And so they'll be paying medical costs for employees until those employees are deceased. And as you know, medical costs continue to grow. There are agencies with much higher pension type plans. For example, we have a 2% at 55 plan, and other agencies might have a 2.7. It's a multiplier plan. So they pay higher pension plans to their employees. We have a pension obligation bond, which will reduce our liability once that bond is paid off in about 2021. So we've taken some proactive actions early, and on our audits, that will reflect. So some agencies have what's called a deficit net position, meaning that they're actually in the red, and that did not happen to us as a result of the changes in accounting. So it's a bit complex from an accounting side, but we have stayed as a positive, and we will not change because we don't have medical benefits. So we have a positive balance sheet, and while it's not insignificant, it's not as significant as for many, many agencies. And employees are picking up a share.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to have a question or make a comment on this particular process? This is your chance. This is the public hearing.
Chris Petlock, 426 Napa Road, Sonoma. So one thing I'd like to comment on, and really, I think it's great that the CIP is now part of the budget process. I think that kind of planning and that kind of setting aside of funds makes it easier for us to see, okay, this is what the city plans on doing. It's not about what's left over or what can we stretch and get done. So I'd like to commend you all on that, and I look forward to reading more about it. Thank you.
All right, is there anyone else wishing to speak? I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bringing it back to council for further discussion or actions. Councilmember Hunley or Cook?
I will be proudly supporting this balanced budget tonight, and if anybody wants to know how we spend over $31 million, the budget's actually very easy to look at, and you can see each year how it changes. And even better is if you come to the budget workshop every summer, because you get to hear from every department head who goes into detail about what the changes are. And then you really understand how much it costs to make the city goes and how impressive it is that we do it, and we're balanced every year. And I can't take credit for most of the fiscally smart decisions we're making. One is related to the unfunded pension liabilities that are so problematic for other places, but I will say that I'm really confident about how we've been doing things, and it makes me a little sad that this is Carol's last budget, but I know that Deanna took the helm with this one, and it went so well that I think that we're going to be in a good position, even with the anticipated economic dip. So thank you so much for all of your hard work, and I will be supporting it tonight.
Okay, Councilmember Cook.
I also will be supporting this tonight, and I just wanted to thank you, mostly to Carol Giovanotto, our city manager. A lot of people don't realize when you look at our budget hearing and you see what the department heads actually erased a little bit of their budget, because at the council level, all year you'll see us, like, we added a CO. We've done all these different changes, and realizing that city staff has to mimic those changes in this budget. And it's very appreciative, because if you see the changes and you see the minus next to them, I think that shows good leadership with you, Carol, and I know this is your last year, and I want to thank you. And I hope that the next city manager can at least fill one of your shoes. And Deanna's not going anywhere, right? So that's, but I will be approving this budget also.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I'd like to say ditto, thank you so much. I've had so many questions just because of my involvement in city government. In fact, this very evening, there's a council meeting, the one I served on in Daly City. They're looking at closing a firehouse, which is a very serious thing, and it's because of their deficit. And so I'd just like to thank you and Deanna. I think you did a yeoman's job on the budget, and I'm very happy about this. It was a wonderful process, and you know, it takes a long time, so it's not, I'm a wonk, I think it said in the paper, and I love this, and not everybody does, but you know, you all did a wonderful job and made it as interesting as possible. However, I will say in the last city, they used to give us gifts, each department. Little t-shirts, little packages of things, but I know, you know, that's why we don't have a deficit. Thank you so much.
Well, Madeline, the Supreme Court made a decision about politicians accepting gifts today.
No,
if you
not
know.
little boxes of candy. You can relax, council member.
So I'm going to support this as well. I think with the management we have in the city, with city manager and staff, that we have the capacity to act, and I think keeping things in reserve and not going out and blowing money like some communities have in our county. I'm very proud to have a balanced budget, and I think we should continue our frugal opportunities. And I look forward to looking at some of the line items down the road. If things start wobbling a little bit, I think there's probably a couple of little places that we could make some cuts. And but let's see how it goes, and I'm going to support it tonight. Thank you.
I think my approach is you know, very inclusive of what the other council members have said. But I also want to say that we have some extraordinary taxpayers here in the city of Sonoma. And frankly, they have let us know when and if there are things that are appropriate and not appropriate. So in combination, it's really to strike the correct balance of having what your community wants and the services that they wish to have delivered, with the possibilities of revenue generation, with the balancing of the expenses on the city side. And the idea is, as a community, you work together to go ahead and provide those things in a priority to which the residents want. In a way, our staff are interpreters, you know, fiscal interpreters when it comes to this right here. But our community will let you know when there's an inappropriate expenditure, or they feel that perhaps this is not right at this particular time for them, and I welcome that. I want to congratulate the members who are sitting here in this audience tonight, because they are actually here hearing this discussion, and there are many who are on TV as well. And to me, this is the most important decision that happens in any particular year, because you go nowhere if you don't have direction to either collect or expend. So this is one of the key elements in a role of being a council member. To that end, I'd like to say that we've had discussions here on the reserve. I would hope that this would be the appropriate time to maybe have direct staff to have a discussion of the reserve policy, perhaps in September. I am very concerned, given the anticipation of discussing, you know, this particular reserve policy in light of what has happened with Brexit in our national scene. To me, I want to make sure that locally, that we are totally appropriated in what we want to go forward and recommend. Because, you know, the scenario could present itself that you could have an event like a Brexis event, and then you could have an emergency. And so the question is, you know, here it's more fire than it is anywhere else, okay, at this particular point. So for me, I really want everyone to understand the complexity of going ahead and making policy, and then possibly when it comes to our Measure J, there might be some incorporations as well. So I would like to go ahead and put that forward. So I also feel that in community grant, which we have experienced a lot of feedback on, that I would recommend that, you know, in my particular viewpoint, that we bring that back sometime around mid-year so that we could have comments around that particular policy as well. We have no idea what the future may bring, and I think it's important to go ahead and review the policy since it's an initial year, and it is kind of a pilot project at this point. So, given that, again, congratulations again to staff, congratulations to the public. I think we have a document that will launch us into the next year. It is a to-do list. It is not a wish list. And thank you, Carol, for that comment. So at this point, is anyone wishing to make a motion? Councilmember Cook.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve resolution adopting the fiscal year budget of 2016-2017 operating capital in the amount of $31,381,210.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have our first approval of the motion for the resolution adoption. We have a second by Councilmember Hundley. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, then it's a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Gallion?
Aye, so with that, we have a 5-0 passage, and congratulations again, department heads for doing such an incredible job, and Deanna and Carol for your participation.
Thank you, and I will be passing all of your comments to all staff tomorrow.
Thank you very much. All right, so we are moving on to our regular calendar for this evening, which is item 7A. This is the discussion, consideration, and possible action to introduce ordinance repealing ordinance number 01-2016, the leaf blower ordinance. 2, adopt resolution calling for an election on ordinance number 01-2016 at the regular municipal election on November 8th, 2016. Or 3, adopt resolution calling for a special election on ordinance number 01-2016 on a date specified in the resolution. So with that, I believe we have the city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. The item before you this evening is related to the leaf blower ordinance, which the council adopted on March 21st of 2016. That ordinance was within the time limit prescribed by law. Successfully, a referendum was submitted. A referendum being submitted on an ordinance adopted by the council immediately suspends that ordinance until such time as the council takes action to do one of the 3 options that are before you this evening. The first option before you this evening is to repeal the ordinance in its entirety. That option puts you back into the position that you were in before you adopted the ordinance. There would be no ban on leaf blowers, and there would be no regulation thereof within the city. The second option before you this evening is to submit the ordinance to the voters at a regular municipal election. That regular municipal election would be the November of 2016 election, as it is currently comprised in that option before the council. The third option before the council this evening is to submit the ordinance to the voters at a special election. That special election is a date that you can pick. As council is aware, the cost of a special election exceeds the cost of a regular election, and we can talk about details regarding that issue when the council discusses the options. I do want to point out that regardless of the outcome, either option 1, 2, or 3, if you repeal the ordinance and if the or if the voters elect not to carry the ordinance forward either at a regular or a special election, the council cannot consider the same or a substantially similar ordinance for 12 months from the date that that action takes place. So that's an important consideration for the council. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you that is contained within your two options of calling the election, and something that you can either do tonight or do at a subsequent date, has to do with the ballot arguments and rebuttal in favor or against the proposed ordinance. The council has the opportunity to direct, as among the council as a body or as a subcommittee, or for the mayor to be the author of the ballot argument. And that currently in the drafts that are in front of you for the place it on a regular election or place it on a special election, in section 16E, as in Edward, these resolutions actually place that burden upon the mayor. If the council wants to discuss that and have other options, we can certainly change that section. But as currently written now, the mayor would be writing those ballot arguments. With that, I can certainly answer any questions that the council may have with regard to this issue. And certainly I'm available to answer questions as you discuss the options.
Council. Yes, Councilmember Cook.
I think there's a lot of confusion in the public as far as this process. Can you explain this process, how it would move forward tonight? Tonight, we have the three options, but if tonight we do decide to go with the election, when would be the next time that the council comes back and talks about this as far as the arguments?
Well, that certainly is up to the council itself. You can decide to have the mayor write those arguments herself, and in that case, it wouldn't come back, assuming you call an actual election. If you want to defer that discussion and have a separate discussion about either the council as a whole writing the argument, a subcommittee writing the argument, certainly you can bring that back. As long as that takes place before the deadline for arguments to be submitted, you certainly have the opportunity to consider that at a subsequent meeting.
And what is the deadline?
For argument submittals, I have to look it up. Thank you, Gay. It's August 12th.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, so we're going to open this up to public comment. Yes.
Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East, and I've stayed out of the leaf blower issue because the Montini issue kind of consumed me for years, so I didn't want to get sucked into another hot local issue like that and not be able to think about Climate Action 2020 or other things, which has been fun and liberating to look at other issues besides the hot local ones. But just looking at this here, off the top of my head, I think that if you have a special election, it would certainly cost more, but people would be more energized and there'd be a lot at stake so that you have a chance maybe for a more final settlement of the issue, even though it would cost more money. With the rescinding the ordinance, the council could possibly work on the Climate Action 2020 7L2 local measure and work on that to minimize leaf blowers as part of a climate initiative to get rid of the, two-cycle engine emissions, which is clearly, not something that we want to be doing. So we want to try to move that way as a smart thing to do. So maybe that's a possible option. And then regular election is cost effective, but it might not bring out the heat that it would be resolved. So I thought I would just get up here and say something since I was here.
Thank you very much.
Jack Wagner, 270 West Napa Street. I've been pretty consistent on this issue. I think how I look at it, the city council did their job when they passed this compromise. That's what I felt was the best way to go forward with this. I think the opponents of it did their job by collecting the signatures for this referendum. I think now we need to give it to the citizens on the general election. I think that's going to be the highest voter turnout. A special election is not going to get anywhere near that Clinton versus Trump's going to get. We're going to have the cigarette smoking ordinance. The state's going to have a couple big propositions on major issues like capital punishment and recreational use of marijuana and stuff like that. So I think you're going to get a good voter turnout. I think it'll get the most people in. Obviously cost effective. I think the only real issue that I've heard from the supporters of the ban is the language on the ballot statement to make sure that it's fair and accurate and that it correctly, communicates to the voters what they're actually voting on. At the end of the day, we just saw, Mayor brought up Brexit, and sometimes when you give the people the right to vote on something, they don't vote the way you wish they would. And you don't support democracy if you don't support it when you lose, because you can't ask someone to support it when you win. And that's part of it. So we need to give this to the people, and I think we've spent more than enough time on this issue. I think we spent more than enough of the staff's time on this issue. And so I look forward to voting on this amongst other important elections this November. And yeah, thanks you guys for getting something done on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Hi, Sarah Ford, 380 East Napa Street. I just want to agree with what Jack said. He said it all for me, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I think it can go on the November ballot. A special election is costly. I don't think it's needed. And I think it's really important that the ballot language be extremely clear and as specific as possible so that people know exactly what they're voting for or against. I think that's what I would say. Thanks. And I actually like what Fred said a lot about tying this in more with Climate Action 2020. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello again. Cecilia Ponison on France Street in Sonoma. I would hope that you do not set aside the ordinance. We've given you every bit of fact, scientific studies, findings by the medical AMA. I mean, you have all the facts. The interesting thing is the Sonoma Valley School District did their reading as well of everything we submitted to you on the terrible effects of gas leaf blowers. And they did their own independent study and came back with an immediate prohibition of ever using gas blowers on the school campuses again, when they realized the danger it was to young children especially, and their own head of maintenance came forward and said, we don't need them. And they haven't used them for months. And the schools look just fine. And the kids are not exposed to gas fumes or particulate matter. And the kids with special needs are not set into a terrible state of discomfort and sometimes, well, it's very hard on them, let's put it that way. And they need a lot of time to recover. So appealing to one's common sense on the one hand and appealing to one's humanity for the health of your children, your neighbors, people who have allergies in Sonoma. I think there are a few of those. People who have asthma, people who get it, like I did, just stepping out their front door and being hit with a cloud of dust and tons of gas fumes that sent me to the emergency room. There are so many reasons not to have these in our daily life. So please, let's go ahead and vote on this in November and get it settled one way or the other. And I would hope that people do take the time on their own to find out what the effects are on their own person, on their children, on their pets, on their quality of life in Sonoma. And I thank you very much for having an ordinance that we can vote on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Skoglund, Skoogland, 126 Blue Wing Drive. And I agree with the previous speakers that, of course, it would make the most sense to vote on this as a community at the November election to save the city the most amount of money under the circumstances. I just really want to thank the majority of the council who voted to have this compromise ban of gas leaf blowers and with the allowance of electric leaf blowers. And I have so many thoughts swirling in my head, but I mostly want to say how much I appreciate what you're doing and how very hard I think it must be to weigh the facts and to make decisions without discounting the public opinion, pro and con, and to really, I applaud your decision to ban, as I just said, the gas, not the electric, because I think it must be very hard to be an independent thinker with so much vehemence and so much emotion on both sides of every issue. And I think that is your job. And I think for me, I don't want to see the gas leaf blowers, but, whatever the voters decide is what we'll do. To me, it's a health issue. And it's not a popularity issue among those who may or may not be affected. But I'm sympathetic to the chore that you have and the work that you do. And I just think that we all need to be better for everybody who lives in this city. And I guess that's it. There's so much emotion swirling around our country and our world that I give you credit for taking that decision, and I hope we're successful at the election. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
John Finucci, Lovell Valley Road, Sonoma. I was one of the 40-plus people that helped circulate the referendum petition over less than 3 weeks' time to qualify this for you to be able to reconsider this evening. I think it's important to recognize that in that length of time, to get 1,200 people to sign a referendum is sending a silent message to all of you. The silent message is that these folks feel that maybe government does not need to be trying to control all the activities in their personal lives. And I think that's another side of the coin that should be considered. And in that regard, I would think that the council should really seriously consider rescinding the ordinance based on that information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one else coming up to the podium, I'll go ahead and close public comment on that particular item, and it's back to council. Councilmember Cook.
Well, I'd like to first start off to say that I will be supporting tonight to bring this to the election on November 8th. But I want to talk about leaf blowers for a minute because I think that we've been talking about it since 2010. And I just want the story to be right and straight out there because we live in Sonoma and we're all Sonoma. And we have an issue. Dogs on Montini was a bigger issue than leaf blowers. And in the end, it got figured out. And I'm sure leaf blowers will be the same. And having it go to the ballot is going to be great. But with that said, what I want to see is I want to see fairness in the election. I want to see Sonoma come together, not be torn apart by it. That's why I don't want to have the mayor prepare the argument. It has nothing to do with the mayor. I think that this council has a responsibility to do that. So I would be also voting tonight to send direction back to staff to have another meeting in July to discuss what kind of arguments would be on that. But the main thing is people realize that what happened since 2010 with the leaf blower issue has really cost the city a lot of money. in city staff time and different issues. And knowing that it's finally going to the ballot, I want to know what the voters of Sonoma think of it. That's why I want both sides. I want to be very fair. Right now, we're through the process where the city council 3-2 vote. I was one of the ones that voted for the ordinance that banned gas leaf blowers but did not ban electric leaf blowers. I fought for that 3 years up here on the council through the whole thing. I asked for an election 3 years ago. So I just want everyone to get the story straight and have this election be something that is for Sonoma and not against Sonoma. So with that said, that's what my vote it will be tonight.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to express? Councilmember Hundley?
Thank you. So it seems like something that most of us can actually agree on is that it should go on the November ballot. I think it's the perfect opportunity because of the presidential election and all the California referendum is going to be a huge turnout. And what I've wanted through this whole process is to get an actual sense of what the community feels. So now that it's going to the ballot one way or the other, I would like to put it there. As far as the language goes, I appreciate the concerns from the last time that the title doesn't accurately reflect what the ordinance does. And I like the language that's in the staff report that specifies that it's gas particularly and permits electric, so I'm okay with that. As far as who writes the pro argument, I don't particularly want to spend any more meeting time talking about this, so I would either like to have a subcommittee do it, hand it over to the mayor, or the people that know the most information about this position anyway is SNAUB, and I would be perfectly comfortable giving it to SNAUB to write it. So I will be supporting any of those. I would not support us discussing it at a meeting, and I also, if it is going to work that way, I think that the names of the council members should be specified because it certainly isn't the city council's position as a whole, as it is a narrow vote. So.
Yes. And who else wishes to speak?
So it's kind of interesting. I think I'm so excited about today. And, I look through the note. First of all, I'm a new council member, so I don't have the experience. I know this has gone back years. And I actually think the guidelines were developed, I believe the first ones were in 2011. And I believe that they have evolved since then. However, they're not followed and they're not enforced. And I think that's something that really was a problem for me. And I think, as I said it in one or two last meetings, that's why we're here. And all along, I spoke to people who were against a ban and for a ban. And I said, I am looking for a compromise. That's what I think would be a decent thing to do. And so here we are. I think the last effort we had was just to ban the gas blowers. The stories have been fantastic. What else? Electric knife. I don't know, gas knife cutters. I don't know what else. This went to mowers. It went to gas. It was pretty fantastic. And I think some of the people that wrote these things are very imaginative. So I got a big kick out of it. But it's interesting in the beginning where I was involved, I believe October 15th as a new council member, everybody was confused. We didn't know each of us had a comment that the community doesn't know what they want. We don't know what they want. I can't say that everybody was on that track, but most of us said nobody knows what to do. And I feel that we had to do it this way. We had to evolve in that way. And I think at the meeting on January 20th, it sort of shifted and we went to revisit the leaf blower issue. And I think actually there's been something that said, and we all voted, it was 5-0 to bring it to the ballot issue. That's not what the minutes say. The minutes say the issue of putting it on the ballot. It didn't say we were all decided to do that. And so that's what the minutes say. I have to trust our city clerk, and that's why I was looking through this information today. And, as I said, this is the reason. We did have guidelines. We never paid attention to them, and they weren't enforced. And now, thank goodness, we do have a code enforcement officer. And I guess I'll ask a question in a while about guidelines. I have to assume the guidelines will still be there. Perhaps it has nothing to do with the ballot measure. And as I said, I feel that this has evolved. We are actually the people that have to make the decisions. And I feel very proud that I came from one spot. I think I agree with it. I have to tell you, I drive down Sonoma, I walk through Sonoma, the gardeners still are blowing those things at high velocity. It's still pretty bad. But you know what? Thank goodness we're in a free country where people are going to vote for this. And I look forward to the outcome, whatever it is, because it's really the word of the people, and the people are our boss. So I appreciate this day, and I'm looking forward to it, and I do support the ban just of gas blowers and at the general election.
And Councilmember Edwards.
So I would be ready to introduce the ordinance. Just repealing the ordinance would be the most cost-effective way to do this, but I don't think I'm going to get there tonight. So when you think about elections and process here in Sonoma, back in 1999, there's a few people in the audience that were around at that time.
End up here.
We packed the chambers on a measure to keep a hotel off our hillside here. And we packed it over and over and over, and we had special meetings where we had 300 and 400 people at a time. And we raised about $12,000 to fight a hotel corporation out of Texas that spent over $250,000. And we won with 78% of the vote, Ken? Something like that? So I feel like I have a pretty good sense of the community. And Mr. Finucchi was up here earlier. They gathered signatures, and I gathered signatures as well, but I left them in my car in the airport, and I didn't get them back to turn them in. So there's actually another probably 70 or 80 signatures that I gathered that weren't on the other sheets. This council did agree to put it on the ballot and then backed off on that, which I was very disappointed in, because we've spent hours and hours and hours and tens of thousands of dollars of staff time and energy. I'm happy to have it on the ballot. I think this election is going to tell a lot of stories about Sonoma and about our country. And people ask me, I went and did I'm in the cheese business, did a cheese board for Hillary Clinton back in April. But I did it for our Congressman, Mike Thompson. He asked me to do it. And you know, when people ask me about when I do those sorts of things and meet all kinds of national people, I had dinner with the governor of Montana last Monday night. And I said, the governor of Montana said to me, he says, you know, you have the hardest job in the world is local politics in a small town. He says, being a governor is easy. And when I asked Miss Clinton basically the same question, she's got a tough job ahead of her, I know, but this job is tougher than anybody. I know we all disagree on this in different ways, but I'm going to support putting it on the November ballot. And I think if this went to calling a special election, I think we are in big trouble up here. So I'm going to fully support it. I think it's still a small issue. It's been going on since 2010, but I think people are cooperating. I do go to the schools, and I don't think the schools are in good a shape, and I will present those facts back to the council later. As far as leaves and debris, and when you really look around town, as I do, and I think I look at it in a little bit different way than the rest of the council, I think you'll see that this is just a tool for people, and I think people will be respectful. I see more and more names on the trucks, but I see a lot of young entrepreneurs working. We're going to talk about housing next and homeless issues, and I think we need to keep that in mind as we continue to try to put more rules on our community. So I'll leave it there.
I'll go ahead and weigh in at this particular point, and then hopefully we will be seeking, if there's no further questions, a motion and action on this particular item. So for me, I think we've come to the point where, for me, it was always about the fact that doing my job up here was about going ahead and creating an ordinance. It was going ahead about doing that particular job as a member of local government, taking that responsibility on. Now, there are provisions. There are provisions when something goes into effect like this, that yes, it can be put up for review as far as our decision is concerned. We've gone through that process. At this point, to me, to rescind an ordinance, we had that option basically at the point that we were making the ordinance, and we chose not to accept it at that point. My position has not changed on that. Special election, I don't think that this is of such an extraordinary nature that we would have to go ahead and wait. I do believe we are on a 88-day calendar. It seems appropriate that we should go ahead and we should put it on a municipal election. As far as, for me, that's where I'm going to stand in. I think it's important to actually get a cue from our voting residents on an issue where something is very clearly stated as to what you are voting on. I'm just appalled by the margin of difference in the Brexit incident and the number of people who have said they had no idea what they were voting for, and they had no idea of the consequences and what it would prevail. So our success or failure will be based on the education of our community, and education of community facts as to what they will be signing or voting for. So to me, I feel that's up to what has yet to be developed as far as a plan of action is concerned. But for me, it is now a decision for the ballot, and it has always been since we knew that we had a verified referendum that came through here. So at this point, I've heard from the public, and I see nothing that anyone has said this evening from the public that will change my mind on that particular item. So I have kept an open mind till this point, but now I am stating my position. As far as arguments are concerned, I am more than happy to work with whatever the council wishes to do. I know in past measures we have gone forward and we have formed a committee of 2 council members, that went forward and have put together a statement that would go on the ballot. So I'm open to that. I'm open to committee or recommendations. I don't know if tonight is the night to decide on something like that, but I feel that we have until July 6th. There might be some new information for some council members, and maybe they need a little bit of time to reflect on it. But certainly we will have time to pursue whatever we wish to put on that statement. So I am more than happy at this point to entertain a motion and possible reflection of the second point. Councilmember Hundley.
I'm going to attempt a motion. I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution calling for an election on ordinance number 01/2016 at the regular municipal election on November 8th, 2016, with the modification that the argument in favor of the ordinance be drafted by the members of SNALB.
I'll second that.
Madam Mayor, if I may
Yes.
chime in here for just 1 second, and I apologize. With regard to the provisions of the California Elections Code giving priority to who gets to draft an argument, you can see on page 2 to 3 of your council staff report, 110 hand numbered, the sections of California Elections Code, section 9287. That is the priority for the submission of ballot arguments. The priority goes in the following order: the legislative body, that would be the legislative body as a whole, a member or members of the legislative body authorized by that body, then individual voter or bona fide association of citizens or combination of voters and associations who are the bona fide sponsors or proponents of the measure, C is bona fide associations of citizens, and D is individual voters. I say this because relative to authorized by the city council has the power to authorize itself or members of your own body, but not third parties or associations of citizens. And I apologize for not making that clear in advance.
And just clarification on the motion, our resolutions read one way, they don't incorporate the associated bodies or the statement. So are we actually going to be making a motion, two motions here?
So the motion as made and on the floor was a substitution for section 16E as in Edward of the resolution, and that's the first resolution in your packet. And the substitution suggested was in place of the mayor that the council would appoint a group of citizens. My point was just that the council does not, under the elections code, have the power to appoint a group of citizens. A group of citizens has the power to submit, but the priority set in the elections code is what it is. The council has the power to appoint itself or individual members of the council.
And
Okay.
so if, I'm sorry, can I ask a
Yes.
question?
So,
If to get to where I wanted to end up, we would have to vote to not have our own argument and then give them an opportunity to step up and do it themselves?
Correct.
So then it seems that that is probably a decision that I assume this council is going to want to wait on, because it especially would involve discussing it with potentially interested parties.
So, Madam Mayor, if I
Yes.
may, if you just remove E from the resolution, section 16E, you do have an opportunity to revisit that issue and discuss later whether the council is a body, an individual subcommittee, or if you want to do nothing relative to submitting an argument on behalf of the legislative body or individual members, allowing a bona fide association of citizens to step up and be the next in line to submit that argument. So you can have that discussion at a later date. What that would mean to the resolution before you would be omitting that subsection E, leaving it blank, and coming back at a later date to have this discussion about what entity might step up to do the ballot argument in favor.
thank you. Councilmember Hundley.
I will amend my motion to be that I would like to introduce an ordinance sending this to the November election by this resolution, but taking out section 16E.
I'll go along with that.
So we have a motion in front of us. Any further discussion? Clarification?
Could I have a clarification?
Yes.
So what we're saying is we have to vote on removing E, to be able to designate someone outside of this.
The motion and the second on the floor includes removing E, so you're not voting separately. If you vote on this resolution as proposed by the maker of the motion and the second, E would not be a part of it, and you would come back at a later date.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So would that later date be July 6th?
It would be the 6th or the 18th, understanding that the 6th is very shortly here, so you're not going to have a lot of time to think about it. The 18th, the July 18th meeting would be the last meeting you would have an opportunity to address this. So
Correct,
it'd either be
'cause-
July 6th or July 18th.
Right, because a lot of people are out of town at this point also, so
Can I just say something, though?
Yes.
The August 12th date is the date that it has to be submitted to the Registrar of Voters office. So you need to look at when it could come back for council approval if you're going to go that direction. In order to get it to the, you don't have a meeting on August 6th. It's been canceled.
So it would have to be July 6th if we were going to be making that, correct?
So just a little further to that input, and thank you, Gay. You only need a subsequent meeting if the body as a whole decides you want it submitted on behalf of the body as a whole and you want to write it as a body. If you're not writing it as a body, it does not, the actual argument does not have to come back for your approval. You would have the option of having the mayor write it on behalf of the council. You would have the option of the mayor write it on behalf of the mayor. You would have the option of appointing a subcommittee and having the mayor write it, or you'd have an option of doing nothing and allowing a bona fide association of citizens to do it. The only option that you have to come back to do it is if, as a body, you want to all write it together and approve the language. That would have to go on a subsequent agenda. Was that clear, or did I confuse you more?
Yeah, so you're saying that it could be an item on July 6th and would have to come back on the 18th for ratification? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that if you eliminate tonight the question of, as a body, do you want to do it? As a council as a whole, and do you all want to draft the language and wordsmith the language yourselves? If that's not one of the options you want to consider, you don't necessarily have to have it on the 6th because you don't need 2 meetings to do it. The first meeting on the 6th would be the meeting to decide that, and the subsequent meeting would be the meeting to actually draft. If you don't want to actually draft here as a body, then you don't need 2 meetings, you only need 1.
Because it will not come back to council.
That's
again.
correct. That's right.
Got it. Councilmember Hundley, then Edwards.
Just a thought on that. I think that having it come back on the 6th, because regardless, even if it didn't come from the council as a whole, it would give whoever was writing it more time. I just think having like a couple weeks after the July 18th meeting would be hard for anybody. So even though it's a fast turnover, I think July 6th would be a good time to settle this question.
Right. And again, we don't have to put that in this resolution. This is just a direction to staff to bring the item back, correct?
As to that issue, correct. This resolution only calls the election and says you're putting the measure on the ballot for November the 3rd. It doesn't speak to it won't at that point speak to the question of who's writing the argument.
So,
Councilmember Edwards
I'm
first.
sorry.
So if I was listening, Councilmember Cook and Hundley have said that they would rather not have the council be part of this writing this argument. I feel that way as well, so we have a majority there.
No, no. I actually said I didn't want the mayor to have the responsibility of writing the argument.
Right.
I want it to come back to language. I've been dealing with this since 2010. I just want to make sure that the council has the obligation of being able to show leadership, of bringing this back and talk about the argument. And on that meeting, we're just directing staff back. The city council may not, as a body, even have an argument, but I don't want to make that decision tonight. The only decision that I said I'd like to make is to put this on the November 8th election at this time.
Well, it sounds like we're saying the same thing, but anyhow, I'm not going to support having the council do it. I think it's up to the citizens who brought this forward and the citizens who had pursued this, and I think that's an important thing to consider.
All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. We've had discussion. Mayor Pro Tem, you wanted to make further comment, or are you good? Okay, I think at this point we need a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte?
I have to clarify this. We're voting not to do the E.
Correct.
Okay.
No E. No
Aye.
E tonight.
You're voting to pass the resolution and calling the election without E. You're not deciding at all about the arguments
Right.
tonight with this motion.
Yeah, because I've sat here, and the only thing I do want to say is I've sat here through this leaf blower thing since 2010, and I have never seen something that has been so, I'm not going to use the word crazy, but the process, every time we do something, it seems like the wrong message gets sent out there. The motion that I heard is what we're going to do tonight is we are calling for an election, not a special election. It'll be on November 8th. We're bringing this back on July 6th, and we're going to discuss if we want to write the arguments or where that's going to head from that direction.
Okay, so I will ask again, any further clarifications? Seeing none.
Oh, that's me.
Seeing none, I will go ahead and call for a roll call vote.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Hundley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Mayor Gallion?
Aye. So we have a 5-0 vote to bring this particular item, okay, resolution for, let me just read it because I think this is important. Okay, so this will be a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma establishing the policies and procedures for a regular election to, wait a minute, hold on one second. Did I do that correctly? Yes, I am reading from 113, the resolution 113. Okay. That is correct, okay. Regular election to adopt or reject City Council Ordinance Number 01-2016 prohibiting the gas leaf blowers and regulating electric and battery-powered leaf blowers in the City of Sonoma, and directing the County Elections Department to conduct this election on the city behalf with the exclusion of E on Section 16. 5-0 vote? Okay. Do we need a 5-minute break? 5-minute break. So here we are, item 7B, discussion, consideration, and possible action on a report of Measure J, revenue performance, analysis of options of the sunset provisions, and direction to staff, city manager and finance director, the dynamic duo up again.
Thank you, Mayor Galligan and city council members. As a component of our fiscal management plan, the city has in place a local transaction use tax, as we commonly refer to it as Measure J. It provides our stabilizing foundation for public services. In 2012, the city went to the voters and presented Measure J for consideration, which consisted of an addition of a half-cent local transaction and use tax to fund city services. This half percent tax is added on to general sales tax on purchases in the city. Until this measure was brought forward, the city of Sonoma had not turned to its constituents for a new tax in over 20 years. The tax measure passed with a 67.1% affirmative vote, well over the simple majority, 50% plus one, needed. The specific text of the ballot measure stated, "To preserve the safety, public services, and quality of life in Sonoma, and provide funding for essential services such as police, fire, and emergency medical services, street and road maintenance, graffiti abatement, and other general community services, shall an ordinance be adopted temporarily increasing the city sales tax by 0.5% for the term of 5 years, with all funds to be spent locally." Since its approval in 2012, Measure J has provided an overall total of approximately $8 million local tax dollars. and in fiscal year 2016-17 is projected to be the fourth highest revenue source following TOT, property tax, and general sales tax to the city's general fund. The revenue has been generated through our tourism-based economy and through residential taxpayers. More importantly, unlike many other current and prior revenue sources, Measure J is sheltered from state intervention because it is a local tax. Only the City Council can determine its use, its duration, and ultimately its survival. The current Measure J was initially set with a 5-year sunset clause and a calculated and focused approach to 1, review the performance of the local sales tax, and 2, to assure taxpayers that the city could and would demonstrate its ability to manage and use the funds in a fiscally responsible way. It also provided the breathing room to analyze how the state would ultimately realign redevelopment activities, fund affordable housing, and further responsibilities to transfer responsibilities to cities without benefit of additional funding. At the time we put Measure J into effect, none of these questions had been answered. This sunset clause is set to expire on June 30th, 2017. And to continue collection of the tax, a new measure must be renewed by voter ballot in November. Absent this local tax revenue source, the city will be facing serious revenue shortfalls in the future, and budget cuts to core public services will be necessary. So I want to go into a little history. I know this is going to be lengthy, and you've heard a lot of lengthy presentations tonight, but it really is important that everybody really understand how we got to where we are. Since 1984, the city's budget structure included the resources of Sonoma's redevelopment agency. This amounted to approximately $4.6 million in the final year of redevelopment, 2011. At that time, the Sonoma Community Development Agency accounted for 1/3 of the city's budget, which was provided through local property tax dollars used for community benefits and improvements such as road improvements, traffic safety, pedestrian and bicycle improvements, sidewalks and streetscapes, creation of the Haven Emergency Shelter, renovation of the library, renovation of the Maisonave House, construction of the new fire station, the police station upgrades, including the council chambers here, purchase of Village Green 2, subsidy to the Sebastiani Theater, contributions to the Sonoma Community Center, especially through their renovation, and other programs that have preserved Sonoma as a great place to live, work, and visit. Through the use of redevelopment dollars, the city also established the Graffiti Abatement Program, a successful economic development program, and financially supported the Sonoma Valley Visitors Bureau, all of which are ongoing today. The Economic Development Program alone assisted approximately 150 local businesses each year through programs promoting business attraction, expansion, and job creation. With the backing of redevelopment, the city was able to keep the cost of providing city services to our residents low. In fact, in 2008, the city eliminated landscaping and lighting assessment districts in order to reduce the tax burden on residents living in certain areas of the city and absorb those costs into the city's general fund. The city used redevelopment funds wisely and for the purposes for which they were intended. Many city projects and core services relied on the use of redevelopment funding to sustain their viability well into the future. Unfortunately, on December 29, 2011, the Supreme Court issued a hard stop decision on dissolving redevelopment agencies, which had the effect of changing the city's future business plan. Through the elimination of redevelopment agencies statewide, the city's general fund became obligated for approximately $417,000 in basic core services formerly funded by redevelopment. In addition to these basic costs, the gap was left for unfunded capital and infrastructure programs, as well as affordable housing programs in the city's 5-year capital improvement plan. The city typically spent a minimum of $800,000 in redevelopment funding annually on road and street maintenance and another approximately $200,000 on affordable housing. Staff and the council at that time, led by then Mayor Joanne Sanders, recognized that business as usual would be changed forever in Sonoma if steps weren't immediately taken, and that sound fiscal decisions would be necessary to secure the city's financial position. The council recognized that with the loss of a key revenue component, the city could not expect to continue to survive and thrive. As such, in June of 2012, the city went to the ballot for the first time in almost 3 decades to ask the voters to approve a local transaction and use tax. The council determined a local tax would have a minimal impact to the average residents, approximately 50 cents for every $100 spent. So, with all that background, why are we here tonight? With Measure J poised to sunset in June of 2017, the council needs to consider whether or not to pursue the extension of the tax as a ballot measure on the November 2016 ballot. Council has options on extending the tax timeframe into the future, basically laid out in 3 options. Number 1, the council could propose to extend the tax measure with a new sunset provision based on a set time frame, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Or number 2, the council could propose to extend the tax measure in perpetuity, meaning there is no stated end date. And if the council did that, let me explain that a little bit. The council could put the tax measure forward with no end date. In other words, it would go on until a future council at any time decided that they wanted to put in and establish an end date. So a future council could evergreen the tax measure, the Measure J, as we call it now. On a new ballot measure, it wouldn't be Measure J, it would be Measure some other letter. But the use tax, where if at some point in the future the council determined through a change in fiscal policy or fiscal direction, they decided that they no longer wanted or needed to continue this tax, they could administratively make the decision to determine that as of the next fiscal year, they would sunset or phase out that tax. They would not have to go back to the voters to phase out that tax or reduce the tax to some level less than the 0.5%. They couldn't raise it, but they could sunset it administratively and not go back to the voters if you put it on, if the voters voted to extend the tax in perpetuity. So that would leave the option for a future council to determine the ultimate fate of the local tax measure. So that is an option for your consideration if you choose to put the extension on the ballot. And then third, the council could choose not to move forward with the renewal of Measure J. If that is the choice the council makes, that would give city staff the advance notice, 12 months, to begin looking at future general fund expenditure reductions equal to the loss of $2.2 million in revenue. So I explained what that, what each one of those would mean if you went with option 1 and decided that you would extend the sunset provision or go to the ballot and renew for 5 years or 10 years. That would set a sunset provision so that a future council would have to go back, if they choose, to the voters in wherever that sunset provision would hit, Number 2 would be in perpetuity, where a future council could administratively at any time decide that they did not want to go forward with that tax and could administratively set their own sunset provision at any time in the future. And number 3, if you choose not to move forward, the Measure J would automatically sunset in June of 2017. I think the most important aspect of Measure J, and something that I think this council, prior councils, and all staff should be very proud of, is the fiscal responsibility and accountability shown by this city in respecting the promise to the voters that they made in spending their tax dollars wisely and for the purposes that it was intended. To repeat the measure stated, it was to provide funding for essential services such as police, fire and emergency medical services, street and road maintenance, graffiti abatement, and other general community services. So included in your supplemental report in your agenda packet is some of the expenditures that Measure J contributed to over the last 4 years that we collected Measure J taxes. And I won't go through all of them, but I do think that there are some significant expenditures that I'd like to highlight very quickly. From the police department, we have the addition of our police canine program. That has paid, number one, I think Officer Dickey is one of our cutest deputies, so, and he's provided an increase in safety and security for our deputies, and has provided a lot of drug enforcement for our community. Also in the police department, we've been able to provide financial support for the school resource officer. We picked up 1/3 of those costs and been able to retain that school resource officer position, which was previously 100% paid for by the county. Under street and road maintenance and the gas tax, we've increased our transfer to gas tax. Again, gas tax, as you heard in the budget, is diminishing, and state intervention in that. We're losing gas tax dollars. We've done a number of slurry seal projects. We've instituted an annual sidewalk repairs program. We've completed improvements at Depot Park that were formerly under the CDA. Under redevelopment expenses, I highlighted we've absorbed contracts for the Sebastiani Theater, the utilities at the emergency shelter, the Visitors Bureau, the Economic Development Services, the Chamber of Commerce contract. Under general community services, we've replaced the City Hall bell tower, and we now have the hourly chime, which I think is great. We've replaced the historical directional signs on the city plaza. We've reestablished the business loan program. We've established the pool fund scholarships for the Sonoma Splash program. We've done a lot, and again, we have maintained our transparency, our fiscal responsibility with the use of Measure J funding. So tonight we are seeking direction from council as to your desire to continue this renewal of Measure J, and if that is your direction, we will bring back resolution on the next agenda to bring this forward to the November ballot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Council members, questions, comments? Councilmember Hundley?
So as far as tonight's discussion, if we do end up voting to extend it, does tonight's discussion about, one, what the ballot argument would entail, and also what items would be listed in the actual title of the measure? Is that for tonight?
We would bring back the resolution next week, or on July 6th, with suggested wording. We could then revise that wording, but we would bring back the suggested wording for your next meeting. It would closely mirror our former ballot. I also will tell you that I put out a City Pulse survey today that discusses the renewal of Measure J and what the public might want to see, potential focus of a future ballot measure. So that was another, so we'll get some feedback on that as well.
Councilmember Edwards? Okay. All right. So if there's no further questions of staff, let's go out to public. Public, please present yourselves to the podium if you wish to speak on this.
Hello, Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. It occurred to me listening to the budget report and when Deanna was saying that the TOT is a volatile source of income and that you're looking at 18 months of possible downturn and revenues going down, that it would be good to use Measure J to find a way to maybe get some different type of economic development that wasn't as volatile as tourism. So that would be something that would maybe balance out tourism in our economy in some way, and I don't know what that would be. I think that, maybe inviting Google up here could even be worse. So I don't know what would be the thing to do to diversify the economy, but I think that, some sort of jobs that wouldn't be service sector jobs. I think people are highly educated in Sonoma. I mean, there's an older population of people who could do some sort of work that older people would do for a better wage than service wage. I don't know what that would be, but maybe Measure J or the new measure could dedicate some of that money to something like that to get in all of the eggs out of one basket of, I think it was 80% on a volatile revenue source. Say, well, let's move that to a little more stable revenue source.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the public comment section. And Councilmember Edwards or Cook, who wants to go first? Councilmember Cook.
I'll go ahead and state that I'll be supporting this tonight. I would be supporting number 2, the council's proposing extended tax measure in perpetuity. I believe that makes fiscal sense, so we wouldn't have to go back to the voters and spend the money if we didn't need the money. Doesn't make sense. I don't like putting a 5 to 10 or 20 year on that, and I would probably leave all my other discussions about Measure J at the meeting on July 6th.
Councilmember Edwards.
Not being a proponent of taxes, this is a tax that I think you don't necessarily feel, but I would only be in favor of it to set a new time frame of 5 years. Because I believe, as we do with funding through service clubs here and my family, when you make it just part of the everyday thing, it just becomes a line item, and then all of a sudden, then the budget keeps growing and growing. And I think if we have a 5-year window, I think it'll help with the frugality that we've had. We have a change in city manager coming. I believe that would be the most prudent thing to do, is to extend it. I would fully support a 5-year extension. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Having been part of this in other situations, at this point, I know that I would support this, but I think I would support an extension of 5 years.
Okay, and Councilmember Hundley.
I definitely support extending it, and I agree that, I think that having a shorter period of time, like today we got such a clear overview of where all the money went the past 5 years. I feel like if it was something that was in perpetuity, there would be less of a focus of having to, prove to the citizens it's something that people can be trusted with again. I was thinking more like 10 years I would support 5 or 10. And just as a general comment, the way that the measure was worded last time I really like, but I feel like the issues that have popped up in the last 5 years, or at least that are the forefront, are affordable housing, water, and economic development. That I think, just to keep it open-ended enough so that it can be flexible to go where it's needed the most.
Carol, I have a question for you. You know, in city managers' meetings, we're not the only city that's going forward and suggesting these particular measures. Being on council when we originally went through this, and this was after much budget analysis, I was on the subcommittee for budget along with the mayor, as far as that was concerned, and the city manager. This was kind of a newer vehicle, hadn't been used for a lot of cities in a very long time. They were not comfortable with going beyond a 5-year measure at that point because they felt that at that point they couldn't really be taking redevelopment away from us, could they? Type of thing was the attitude. We didn't have much financial information running on the ground. We're 5 years down at this point. Redevelopment is not coming back. And the fact is that if we don't allocate something that goes 100% to us, what other vehicles do we actually have that will give us that 100% return? And we ourselves are selecting how we choose to go ahead and spend it. Frankly, my question, I think I'm out of the question now, just I'm more stating, but for me, the perpetuity statement is very much about, we've tried this. The 5 years was kind of a pilot on this. Most cities are going through renewal after renewal, correct? And they're going for a longer time period. They're not going for the same shorter time period. They're going for a longer time period. All right? And the reason that they want to do this is they don't see this ending, and we have got this crest of a wave that could be somewhere around 2018 that we know is coming. So to me, I think where I'm coming from is I'm looking at the risk assessment of this. To go ahead and take today in time and cull out $2.2 million and say that to Deanna over here, find me $2.2 million because we're not going to have that next year. Our 35 employees would immediately be scaled down appropriately. Our community grant fund that we put together would be scaled down immediately. Our, you know, Dan is sitting back there very quietly, all right, having heart palpitations because what's happening to roads and circulation elements, because there is no money in there. All right, we're talking $800,000 that was used for roads and maintenance that suddenly went down to zero. We had no idea where that was coming from. So I think in the perspective of how I lay this out, that this is fundamentally something that we use in one-time expenditures that come our way in that 2.2 window. And it may not be 2.2. It might be 1.8, or it might even be 1.5, depending upon where things go, as low as 2008, 2009. And I remember my homework from that particular subcommittee, and believe me, that was dour when I was looking at those figures at that point. And you would have wished that we would have had a reserve that would even cover that. But we don't have a reserve. And if we have a reserve policy that we're going to modify, we have to go ahead and incorporate all our vehicles. So to me, Sonoma's great. It can be better, but it's not going to be better unless it's foundationally sound. And our general budget is where we are pulling these dollars. It's not in our water fund or our other cemetery funds and whatever. But, you know, our bottom line and our debt is really important. I remember the arguments. I remember the reasons and justifications. I remember the council coming up here and saying, this is it. I mean, it was a solid support because we knew this was our one time. We hit, if I'm correct, we have a certain percentage in sales tax that we can go to, and then we can't extend beyond at this point. Is that correct? All right. So if we vacate this, we have no idea what may come in its place that is not city related. So be careful what you wish for, because this is not something that I see as a trifle decision. This is very important. And in perpetuity, the fiscal management in this would be that your council is not going ahead and accessing or reserving it. It's saying we have stayed the course. We no longer need these funds. I can't sit here today and say that we no longer need those funds. And given the opportunity of only extending that 5 years, I don't know in 5 years if I'm going to be able to say that the city no longer needs those funds. But I certainly don't feel with the information that's being presented for me today. Again, I seem to be obsessed with Brexit. All right, I just want to say that these incidents can start occurring on more than one venue. And I really feel that my responsibility is to our local demographic, and it is to the solvency of our particular community. I do not want to see health and safety wasted, or, and cut. We've done all of this fine tuning to get to the point where we are at a level where we can go ahead and give the services that the residents are demanding of our community. Service would most definitely be interrupted. So, what am I going to support tonight? I am going to be supporting that this actually be in perpetuity. And I am going to support that this actually be renewed in that particular respect. Now, I will wait for other council members to continue their comments. Yes.
I would like to jump in with that. With the market losing 1,000 points in the last 2 days, to go and tell people they're going to be paying more taxes for 10 years or in perpetuity, I think is a mistake. And I believe that, giving people an out in 5 years, and if the future council in 5 years decides to redo it again, I think that you would get more support it's like having an employee or having an investment. I mean, we're making an investment that the council and the staff is going to be prudent with this money, and I will only support it for 5 years. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll just add to the debate. The reason I would like to go with number 2, perpetuity, is based on the fact that, remember, the council doesn't even have to go 5 years. If something turns around in 2 or 3 years and the council decides that, yes, our tourism went down to 0 and we want to lower our sales tax because Napa has a higher sales tax, it gives the council more room. It's kind of like the smoking ordinance that happened in 1993 when it went to the voters. Now we have to repeal it to get a new one. This is going to the to the electric where they can vote on it. But the pilot program for 5 years worked. I think the community fund and I think the focus and the council goals that I see within at least the next 3 years looks like the new Major J money will definitely be welcomed. And I will be supporting the Major J based on the fact that I don't want another government entity to slip in there, because use it or lose it. That's usually what happens at the government level. But I think that if you put a year on it, like 5 years, I just think that if we wanted to repeal it in 3 years, we wouldn't have that ability. And I would do it because I want local control. And I think that that is more of a local control issue for me.
Councilmember Edwards or Hundley, you wanted to say something? So let's do Rachel first and then
Yeah,
Councilmember Edwards.
I think local control is having a finite period of time to let the community vote on it again as it changes. I think that, needs are gonna change, and at the end of the day, this is the people's money. So I don't have a hard time letting the people decide repeatedly that this is something that they wanna do. And I think also with a finite period of time, that one particular council can't cut it off when they can't get it back. You have to wait the whole 5 years to wait and see how it goes. So I just think that having a period of time, I think that it's something that people would trust more. I think that it would have an easier time passing. I'm leaning towards 10 years because 5 years flies by, but depending on, this is not something I'd want to see stall, so depends on where my co-council members end up on this.
Councilmember Edwards?
So I don't believe back when Measure A started, it was a pilot program. It was 5 year with a sunset, and that's how we sold it to people. And if we come back and say, oh, by the way, it was just a pilot program, and now we want to hit you in perpetuity for it, I think is a huge mistake politically. And I think it's not that big of a deal to make it 5 years versus 10. And I'm, like I said, I'm going to support it only if we go with 5 years, because I think it's that important. The ability to sell it, because we're going to have other issues coming up outside of this that are going to be on the national or the state ballot, et cetera. Most people vote no for any kind of tax, and we need 50+1. We had a lot of support because we had a consensus of support on the council at that time and all the way through the community leadership. And I would just hate to see that split and have this go down. But I'm very firm with the 5 years because I think it's the most prudent thing and practical thing to do and the most saleable to the community.
Our Tourist Improvement District, when does that sunset?
That was approved on a 10-year,
And that was last year that we approved that, or 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
So we're 8 years on that. Thank you. Madeline, any further comments?
I don't know, being part of another board here in Sonoma, I know they always pondered this. Oh, I'm sorry. They always pondered this in perpetuity, 10 years, 5 years, and I don't know what they're actually going to do this year. When I sat on the hospital board, I don't know what they've decided. I love the idea of in perpetuity, but I think more palatable would possibly be just the 5, because it's not really a long-term investment for people, and I think it just it feels more. I think as a voter and as someone who's been part of this, and regret that it isn't longer. But it feels like it's the safest thing to do. And I think as Councilmember Hundley mentioned, possibly some of those funds, and I don't know if I understood you correctly or heard correctly, possibly going into some type of affordable set aside, which I think is really, really important, because I think people are looking for action from us on that subject. But I'm still, I think, unless I'm, convinced, I think for me, the 5 years is still something I will stay with.
Well, for me, the 2.2 million that we're currently discussing here in time, I need to see that that's going to be renewed. If there is a majority here that does not see my point of view on, where I feel this is, and remember that I have been here since 2008 and 9 and have seen how absolutely devastating this can be. Madeline, you've probably seen that also in 98 in your reservoir there. This is not a pretty picture if this is not available. I can honestly hear everyone's side. Maybe Carol, you could weigh in a little bit on this and tell us what you think. I'm kind of stuck.
Okay. I I hear all of you know, and take into consideration, you know, all of your positions. I think your prudent course of action, honestly, if you're asking my opinion, I think your prudent course of action is to go with a 5-year. It served the city well in its initial 5 years. I think that in a 5-year increment, you can come back and report back to your constituents and to the taxpayers. We do most things on a 5-year plan, 5-year forecast, 5-year CIP. I think that it's easy to prepare a 5-year forecast and report out on a 5-year period. I think it's conservative. I think that you are going to be looking at new administration here, regrettably. No. But I think that also, will give the next city manager, a game plan, if you will. It will give that person a roadmap for the next 5 years. And so I think that is reasonable. I think that, our citizens will see, how we were responsible in managing the funds for the prior this past, almost 5 years, or will be 5 years. I think that we have our financial house in order to carry it forward for the next 5 years. And I think that they will support the city in the next 5 years. I think we have a lot. I think we have a lot to do in the next 5 years, and I think that it will carry us forward. And there will be a lot happening in the next 5 years. And as you said, there's going to be a lot of, local, regional, state, and national changes in the next 5 years. And I would, if I were advising you, I would carry it forward to the ballot for a 5-year sunset provision and see where this city is in 5 years. I think that we've had great fiscal management at the council level, and I think that will continue. And I think in 5 years, you will be able to report back to the voters and see if, the need is to continue, or if you're in a position that you can allow it to sunset in 5 years.
Thank you very much for your opinion. Council members, any further comments, motions, or actions? Councilmember Hundley.
Are we doing a motion today, or is it just general direction?
Actually, just direction. I don't necessarily need a form of a motion. If I would just need direction tonight, so that we can draft an ordinance to bring back with draft language for the next agenda.
All right, let's just go down the panel so you have direction from all of the council members for incorporating ideas. All right, Councilmember Hundley, begin.
All right, I will be supporting putting it on the ballot to extend it in a duration of 5 years.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, and my vote would be to put it on the ballot. I would still like to see the perpetuity. Can't even say that, but and I say the reason maybe I didn't get it across to my colleagues, but what if the 5 years is too much? I look at what the library, when there was a tax. There's these taxes that keep coming down the road, and if taxes do go too high, and this council doesn't have the ability to adjust for that, it could be very hard on the city of Sonoma. I like having it in the control of the city council based on that fact, because I see what happened with the smoking ordinance. There's some things like the leaf blower. It's going to go to the voters, but that whenever it has to change, it's got to go back. And that is the only reason I'm supporting this, because I don't know if we need it for 5 years. And that's what I want to go on record for. I definitely would not want to do 10 years. The 5-year sounds okay. I'm not totally against it. I really don't want to go a 3-year because I don't want to waste the taxpayers' money of coming back in 3 years. And when I said pilot program earlier for Councilmember Edwards, what I was talking about is I remember when Major J, I was the vice president of the Chamber of Commerce at the time, and I didn't want to see any taxes. I've always repealed all taxes, but Major J was one that I supported, and I even had a Major J sitting on my front yard, based on the fact that I knew that was a need that the city had to, to have police and fire and everything. But I think that it's a mistake for this council to just put another 5 years on it. I think that we need to have the ability that in 2 years, if something happens in the city of Sonoma and we decide, hey, we are being taxed way too much, at least we have the ability to remove it. And that's the reason that I'm not going for the 5-year.
Okay, Councilmember Edwards?
Well, I still think a majority of people that live here think they're getting taxed too much, period, by the feds, the state, and otherwise. And I think that it's, all I can say is that this is, to me, is the prudent thing to do. I'm going to fully support it. And I can't remember the last time somebody said, oh, you don't have to pay those taxes, and not find another tax to give you. So, I mean, I just don't, I've never seen my taxes go down. I don't know that we need a motion. I guess we're not going to have one,
No,
but
it's just consensus for
Yeah,
Carol.
so it's definitely 5 years for me, as I've stated previously. Thank you.
And Madeline?
And 5 years for me as well.
So you're in support. Just a clarification again, if in 5 years we decided at year 3 that we did not need it, would a council be able to lower it, adjust it, anything like that? I mean, or is it just like once it's embedded, okay, and voted on, you cannot do another thing with it?
I'll get back to you on that. I will contact State Board of Equalization and have that answer for you on the next, and report back on the next agenda. Because I do not want to give you an incorrect answer. So I
Right,
will.
but that satisfies my in perpetuity. That might be something that would give me the ability to support a 5-year versus having in perpetuity. And I just wanted to know, is that
Yes.
something that you could do? All right?
I will pose that question, State Board of Equalization, and have that response for you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I think you have direction from council. So we will go on to item 7C, and some of our audience members have been very patient for this item. Thank you very much for being here. This is discussion, consideration, and possible action on a report by the Facilities Committee regarding the proposal by the Haven to establish a safe parking pilot program for Sonoma homeless. And this is our city manager, Carol Giovanotto.
Thank you, Mayor Gallion. Before you is a report out from the Facilities Committee. At your June 6th council meeting, the Sonoma Oversun Night Support presented a proposal on a safe parking program that they were looking at establishing as a pilot program at the Haven. At that meeting, requested that this issue be taken up by the Facilities Committee. And the Facilities Committee did meet last Thursday and discussed more in depth the proposal. Councilmember Edwards and Councilmember Cook sit on the Facilities Committee. Also attending that meeting was myself and Police Chief Sackett, and representatives from SOS were Kathy King and Cindy Vroman, and a representative from Catholic Charities was also in attendance. I'm going to give just a brief report, and then I will ask Councilmember Edwards and Councilmember Cook to also report out, and then time for members of SOS to speak as well. Councilmember Edwards did meet with representatives of Catholic Charities Jenny Lynn Holmes Davis to get further information on the totality of the program countywide and experiences with other cities, and he will be able to expand a little bit more on his conversations there. Catholic Charities are expanding their permanent site in Santa Rosa to accommodate more services. And Councilmember Edwards discussed his desire to look at the City of Santa Rosa program and their efforts in addressing homelessness, and to reach out to their council members, Schweidhelm and Oliveras, because they are working on this issue as well. And Councilmember Edwards expressed continued understanding of the situation and the plight of the homeless, but had concerns with the limitation of the area and the need to address the issue on a regional approach. And then I was asked to report on the issues of zoning compatibility as stated in the original June 6th staff report. Our planning director, David Goodison, was on vacation, but he had discussed with me the background on some of the issues, and so I reported to the facilities committee. And on step one, currently the city has an ordinance that prohibits camping, including sleeping in cars. Should any consideration be given to this program, council would first need to bring forth an amendment to the ordinance to change this provision. And as stated in the amendment, would be citywide and not specific to the designated 5 spaces that were laid out in the proposal. And so this then becomes an allowance for elsewhere, camping in cars for elsewhere in the city. And then step 2, since this is a pilot program that may come back as a year-round proposal, notification to neighboring properties should be considered as a modification to the lease for the Haven. Consideration needs to be given as to how the proposed use relates to zoning regulations. A temporary or pilot program might be permissible with a temporary use permit, which must be heard by the Planning Commission. Step 3, if any consideration is given to a year-round program, the development code does not clearly address this activity, and the code includes a provision to the effect that uses are not listed in the code are considered to be prohibited. David further stated that to address this issue, if the council wanted to pursue this concept, an ordinance modifying the no camping provision could be adopted that would allow for some exception if a temporary use permit is granted. This would place some built-in limitations on the concept and would open a public review process. Councilmember Cook discussed whether this was compatible with the intended use of the facility, which was originally built for an emergency shelter or transitional housing. He was in agreement with Councilmember Edwards in continuing to review the area and working with the county on the issue and potentially finding a larger area or space to meet this need. Chief Sackett stated, as the chief for the city, and he is the supervisor for the Valley area, he sees this as a complex problem. The city of Sonoma is a smaller municipal area that tends to draw from a much larger Valley county-wide area that provides services to those in need, all of which identify with Sonoma. Excuse me. Chief Sackett sees several conflicts with the ordinance and conflicts with people, which will require further study. And Matthew from Catholic Charities stated he handled the safe parking program countywide and would like to have further discussions with Councilmember Edwards and Councilmember Cook. He also stated that they were working with several churches of various denominations. And he stated that one other public site had been established at PRMD at the County Administration Center. Matthew stated statistics showed a decrease in crime and police activities. And the Catholic Charities adds porta potties to the location, allows plug-in electricity to vehicles if needed, and that it's a self-sustaining program. Kathy King and Cindy Vroman also stated that they would add additional staff to monitor the vehicles and assure that no more than 5 registered vehicles would be on site and that each would be fully registered. Staff would be doing the intake of the vehicles. Chief Sackett expressed concern that vehicles that were turned away would park in the vicinity of the Haven on city streets and become an enforcement issue. Cindy Vroman noted that the city of Santa Rosa had to change their ordinance to allow sleeping in cars, that all adults and residents should be allowed freedom of movement, and the city should be about protecting the homeless. There was a significant amount of discussion. I think all the discussion was well placed, but I think also there was a lot of still outstanding issues and unanswered questions. The meeting concluded at 4:10, and there was no decision or action taken at the meeting. I'll allow, at this point, that concludes the report out and the notes from the committee, and I'll turn it back over to Councilmember Edwards and Councilmember Cook for further discussion.
Is that on? Okay, good. First of all, I want to thank Kathy and Cindy for staying this late. I appreciate it. And I in no way profess to be an expert about homelessness or anything else. As I stated in our meeting, I'm just looking to learn more about it. So I went over and met with Jenny Lynn, who is the executive director at Catholic Charities. We spent about an hour and a half. I arrived there, as I stated in our meeting. I did a little circle around the neighborhood. My mother-in-law lived about a mile, not even a mile and a half, but just about a block and a half around the corner on the other side of the freeway from the St. Rose School, where Catholic Charities had a parking program that unfortunately ended up in a few little problems. But that's what we discussed. We didn't discuss any opinions about should there be parking or no parking. It's really about what is our problem that we have in our community. And it's not just our community, it's everywhere. I've been in 5 states or 6 states in the last week. And because we're having this discussion, I'm noticing homeless people in ways that I didn't know that I knew how to, so I'm learning a little bit. And but there's homeless people in every community. When I travel to Europe, there's homeless people in Europe and any country. But we have an issue that we need to deal with here. So in my questions, I basically left it with, and what I noticed in my visit. So I went out where my mother-in-law's house was, and I just kind of did this neighborhood look, and there were some motor homes and other things that were obviously, they weren't abandoned, but they were obviously mobile homes parked on city streets there. And being the neighborhood, I think Catholic Charities owns most of the block that they're on. You'd have to go there to see it, but I think they own everything but 2 homes, and they're building a new center there, which has hopefully some great potential. They also have a parking site on site, but they had people parking at St. Rose, and then some of the people from the church kind of got on the people, and some of the other homeless people had some issues with people that had the parking spaces, and it was nothing that could be dealt with from my level at that point, but it caused concern for me with our area here. And trying to think of, what could we do? And even as I pulled up today, I'm thinking, wow, these 5 council spots back here might be perfect. But that's not for me to decide.
We'll take them.
But in my meeting with Jenny Lynn, Councilmember Schwenhelm and Oliveris are both, one's a former police chief and one's a former lieutenant, I believe. And they're both very active with Catholic Charities. So I left it with Jenny Lynn and we're going to arrange a meeting for the 4 of us or any other council members who would like to come. I need to learn more about it before I can say, all right, yeah, let's go put 5 parking spots there and make it work. I'm still open to the solution and working on the solution. I work with the food bank, as I've mentioned to Kathy, and we provide services to Catholic Charities, and they're one of the agencies that we work with. And I guess it's hard for me to say no to people when they ask me for something, like the food bank, when they ask me to, work or raise money, that sort of thing. I want to get more involved in this subject because we obviously have our issues here. I think everybody on this council can identify the handful or the dozen homeless people that we know are here. Thanksgiving meal, I had one of the guys that comes to he's been coming to Thanksgiving for the last 10 years, and he stopped me. I don't remember exactly where it was, but he says, "Oh, you're the Thanksgiving guy," and it made me feel very warm that he remembered, because I always make sure I pack him up an extra meal when he leaves. But I know that's not the solution either, just once a year. So I think that I'm willing to be open. I wouldn't mind pushing this. I hate to kick things down the road, but pushing the decision down the road a little bit, because with just the 3 weeks that we've had, and I've been traveling as well, I haven't had enough time to really dig in, and I would love other input from other council members, but at least for me to have the opportunity to go see the 2 council members in Santa Rosa, just to, because they're working very actively, and being former police officers, they have the routine down, and they know what's really going on. And so, I guess I'm asking the council to consider that in our discussions. I don't know if I've covered everything that we covered at that meeting, but I'm not ready to put it right there and just say, yeah, let's go for it. I do respect the chief, and you guys all know the same names and the folks and the people that are affected. And I want everyone to be safe. And I think you talk about there may be an alternative space in the county, and that it might have a little less conflict at this point. I also received a call from Supervisor Gorin this morning, promoting the idea, and we talked about county solutions, and and the other important things that Chief Sackett brought up is that we're the only small community that has a shelter. Healdsburg and is it Cloverdale do not have one. I don't know if Windsor does, but I'm not sure. But I know Petaluma does with cots, Santa Rosa obviously, but I think we take on a pretty big share of, and these are the chiefs. He and I had not had a discussion before. And I look to have more conversations with them because I want to know more about it. I trust the police agencies, the sheriff's department, et cetera, in their opinions, because they're not out to hurt anybody. We all realize that we have an issue, and I think that and the last thing I left, and I'll stop rambling on here, but with Jenny Lynn, was that I want to learn how to talk to a homeless person. And I don't know that I know how to do that yet, and I think that's something we could all probably do. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. And Councilmember Cook?
I'll make my comments after public comment, because I think that coming from the facilities committee meeting, and I appreciate Gary Edwards going over to Santa Rosa. We couldn't link up at the same time, but my comments after public comment would be better.
All right. Hold on just a second. You can get up, though. I don't want you to have to go again. Is there any other future or other questions that maybe council wants to ask at this point? Because I will go ahead and go to public comment then.
My name is Kathy King. That's Kathy with a K, and I live in Moon Valley Park. I am the director of Sonoma Overnight Support, which is the shelter that the city owns, and we call it the Haven. I want to first thank the Facilities Committee, thank Councilman Edwards and Cook, and the city manager for meeting with us last week and to further the discussion. There's one slight clarification to the report. The reason that the one site, the Santa Rosa site, which is a Catholic church, and had a problem was that the parishioners were the problem, not the homeless people. All other 8 sites that Catholic Charities have renewed their contract with Catholic Charities and expanded their slots, parking slots. So that's a real positive thing. So what I'd ask the council to do is to, like Gary said, is to, keep looking at this issue for us, to see if you can come up with just maybe not redo the whole amendment, but make an exception. I was looking at the ordinances. They're very interesting. Some are about not sleeping on hay. I mean, you have some really old ordinances around. So if you could make an exception to the ordinance, we would appreciate that. I want to say, given all the discussion on the budgets, this would be no cost to the city. The cost would be either we could get some of the county money or SOS would raise the money and absorb the costs. So we're hoping that you can continue to look at the issue and not put it on the back burner. The issue of homelessness is nationwide. It's not going to go away, and with no affordable housing and the scarcity of jobs, there continues to be 30 people on our waiting list. We only have 10 beds. If we could look at those sites and actually designate them for people that live in Sonoma, we can do that. We have their names. And they would be for the most vulnerable. The reason we want them to be near the Haven is that our monitor would be there, there would be a bathroom, they would feel safe. And most of them are women. So what I'd ask you is to continue looking at this request. There's 56 parking slots out there. We'd like to do a pilot, maybe starting in August, and to test it out, see if it works. And then if we do, we would then come back and talk about, if it's working, if it's not working, get the input from the police chief, who's been nothing but nice to us, and we cooperate with him. If he has a problem with somebody, he talks to us, we talk to him. So we have a good relationship with the police. All our people know the police. They all know him, and we're working on this together. This is a very complicated thing, and I'd like to ask for more time so that you can further your study and your discussion, and we could then all be compassionate to the people that are in Sonoma that are without a home. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much. Let's go ahead if we have any other public comment on this.
Hi, Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. I'd like to refer to the portrait of Sonoma County, which I've been recently looking at, and the Sonoma Community Development Commission. And there's serious housing challenges in Sonoma that are leading people towards homelessness, and I think that's worthy of noting that it's something that probably is not going to get better, but just get worse. And what can we do here? People can act individually, can do grassroots community organizing. You can have government act or have charity. And so you're government. That's who you are. You're the city. You're not the county. You're Sonoma right here. And so I think Gary's idea of the city council spots was a great idea because that doesn't conflict with the baseball fields. And there it is right there. It's like right in front of your face. So, are you going to act or as the city, as the actor that you are? You're government. You're not charity. You're not grassroots. This is who you are. And so I think it's incumbent upon you to act and do your part and act where you can. And so I think that's where local government is easy. It's all you need is 3 votes to do it. And then that's easy as that. So that's my suggestion.
My name is Cynthia Vrooman, spelled V as in Victor, Rooman. I live at 742 Heather Lane, Sonoma, and I am the president of the board of directors of Sonoma Overnight Support, and I am speaking on their behalf. I want to thank Councilman Cook and Edwards for coming, and for Councilman Edwards of going to Santa Rosa, and also for Carol for the meeting, for the Chief of Police, and for Matt Moulet, who, by the way, has a family here from Sonoma. He's a native Sonoman, and he runs the parking program for Catholic Charities. And Len Mirablis is actually the executive director of Catholic Charities, but Jenny Lynn Holmes runs all the homeless area, issues. So I am excited to hear that we all think that we should look at this and study it. I don't know if you got to see the latest Press Democrat, the Sunday edition, and they point out that the homeless statistics in our county are sobering. Officials estimate that 2,000 people in Sonoma County are without permanent shelter, and a homelessness rate higher than San Francisco and 3 times higher than the national average. I know that we have homeless people in Sonoma, and I'm just like Councilman Edwards. I began to notice it when I got involved with Sonoma Overnight Support, and I met the individuals and then worked with them. A lot of people in the county and even in the city of Sonoma feel that most of our homeless people are just transients who are not connected to the community. However, the official statistics, according to the Press Democrats article, 85% of the homeless, lived locally before they became homeless. 55% lived in the county 10 years or more. And we experienced that at the shelter. I realize that the city of Sonoma is small. I realize that we border the Sonoma Valley, where much of the poverty is. According to the Sonoma County study, we're right next door to one of the highest low-income communities. Well, we need to be good neighbors. And that's what I meant, that Sonoma not necessarily solve the homeless problem, but help to manage it, and to take care of the homeless people we find on our doorstep. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this? Please step forward.
I'm Frank Wines, 2003 Denmark Street. The last name is Windes. I'm part of the Methodist Church group that's been pushing on housing. And the thing that we're trying to deal with here tonight is that there is a continuum from the wealthy people to the people who have nowhere near enough money to afford a house. And the SOS program has been the only relief that we've got for these people who've been pushed out of their homes by the economics that are going on with the shortage in housing. I recall when SOS was first started, and what a relief it was when I was hanging around our church and a homeless person would come and say, "Can you help me somehow?" And we were able to send them to SOS, and they would get a hotel room for the night. And this thing is just, it's been there. This is not a new problem, but it's an urgent one for the people who have been pushed out of their houses. And I really want to encourage you to find some way to enable this program to go ahead as soon as possible, because the need is really great. And there's no way they are going to solve the whole problem, but they can show that it can be helped. And they can show us that there is a way to manage the people that we do help. And I think their program that they proposed sounds really good. And I hope you will find a way to give them a chance to get this 3-month trial as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wishing to speak?
Barbara Mahon, Mahon,
530 7th Street West here in Sonoma. You know, it's been a privilege the last couple of times to be with you as you do your work and provide leadership in our community. And I was working to not get into an adversarial role with you around this issue, because what I realized, I was especially touched listening to you, Council Edwards. I think doing the right thing can sometimes be really difficult. I think it calls us to stretch sometimes and be more courageous than sometimes I or you or any of us want to be. But I think some moments call us to go beyond our own personal paralysis and governmental paralysis. I was really struck listening to you all about the leaf blower incident decision. And on one hand, your clearly frustration and rightful frustration that this many years to do something that doesn't sound, from my viewpoint, too large. Whereas when I think of 5 parking spaces for 5 people to have a shower and a meal, it's like, gee, that sounds simple to me. So my question is, how do we get to yes? What I was reading is there were a lot of concerns, fears. What I do hear, there's a lot of fear around homelessness, homeless people. And I was touched by the authenticity of your comment, what you would like the opportunity to talk with a homeless person. So what that told me is a homeless person is totally other in your life experience. And the truth is, for many of us, a homeless person is totally other. And I think maybe that Ken said last meeting, that homeless person is us. We are that homeless person. So I will cut to the chase with asking you to move forward pretty immediately. This is a 5 parking space temporary pilot program. We're not talking about, change the world, folks. So I have to say, I am challenging you as just a human being to tell the world Sonoma is willing to take a small risk. Because if we don't, we are going to have huge national and global problems with the disenfranchised. We're beginning to see it already, speaking of Brexit, and numerous other things. So this, in some ways, is a reflection of something much, much larger.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll stop. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, seeing no one from the audience, let's go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to Councilmember Cook.
Well, thank you. I wanted public to speak a little bit because I wanted to hear a little bit more from the Haven. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Haven and SOS for the need that you're doing on the city's behalf. I know it's a hard one. I'm kind of wearing 2 hats right now, one as a council member and one as a facilities committee member. And the big decision in my head was the SOS is a transitional housing facility. And that's what it was made for, was to allow somebody to come there, get back on their feet, and leave. I don't want to lose that. And the decision that I had to make in my mind is adding 5 more cars in front of it, possibly negativity happening, possibly based on issues, could actually ruin the whole thing that we've worked hard for with the Haven. The proximity of the Haven is right next to the Field of Dreams. I've heard people say it's right next to the police department, which they think that's an asset, and I look at that's a liability because we're not staffed 24/7 at the police department. So when you start talking about safe havens, people that are in trouble can get in their cars and drive to the police department, call 911, and a police officer could meet them if they really felt that was a safe haven. I know they could call from their house also. But this was kind of the decision process that I used in my mind. And it was a hard one. Talking to the police chief, we're 2.2 miles, and looking at how small we are, and the valley is bigger. Then in the facilities committee meeting, we got on a discussion of what is a resident. And homelessness doesn't have any jurisdiction, so I don't want to even sit and have that debate because I believe that homelessness is an issue. It's a nationwide issue. So what can the city of Sonoma do to help? Well, I think the city of Sonoma is better to get in partnership with the county to try to get maybe a task force from a couple council members or some of our commissions and take a look at this and try to do a partnership. We have a partnership with the fire department. We have a partnership with the police department. I am going to be voting no tonight for the 5 spaces in front of the Haven. And I'm not just saying that because I'm trying to protect the Haven from itself. I'm not going to take the easy route out on that one. I just think that there are concerns that we need to get the county involved with us and take a look. Homelessness, affordable housing, drug issues, there's all these issues that we have county health, and we are better served to get that energy based that way. So tonight, regrettably, and I appreciate you sitting through the leaf blowers and everything else. I want to make sure as a council member that I extend to you that we do need to work on this safe parking, but try to find a better spot. I think that the one that we picked in front of the Haven, I think it just won't work at this moment. And the kicker probably at the end was knowing that we'd have to change a major ordinance in the city of Sonoma to allow camping. And I looked, and the reason that ordinance is there is based on, people just don't want to have people camping in Sonoma. And I think that it's better to just leave it with a partnership with the county. So with that, I'll be voting no tonight.
If I could just have direction here, are we actually voting on this item tonight, or are we giving direction to staff? What is it you're really requesting of us tonight? Is it a report out and maybe further action?
Well, at this time, staff, it's if you want staff to do anything more, or if the facilities committee or council members wish to just continue to pursue additional information as the facilities committee. At this time, staff has no direction to do anything more, so we will not be pursuing any additional information unless directed by council.
Okay, thank you. So, council members, with that in mind, I just want to move forward. Okay, Rachel, you look like you were ready to speak.
Yes. First of all, thank you to Councilmember Edwards and Cook for doing some of the legwork on this, and Councilmember Edwards for traveling up to Santa Rosa. And I feel like that there is still a path to continue down before a definite answer should be made. I've heard from a lot of different sides, the dog park, Field of Dreams, there's certainly a lot of concerns there, and then with issues that have been raised by the police chief, and perhaps things that have happened to other parks, but for all of those, on this side, there's this possibility of solutions and logistics, and I think there's so many ways that perhaps some things on this list could be addressed by some things on this list, you know, things like time and, you know, what the registration process is. And I mean, I feel like the ultimate step would be some sort of sit down between SOS, perhaps city staff, the police chief, you know, whoever on the council is still working on this, to see if they actually put together a plan. And then I think it also should involve, you know, some of the community neighbors that are perhaps concerned about this, because maybe instead of setting up a situation where there's going to be conflict, it could be ways that we could make it so there's not the concerns that they think they're going to have. So I think that there's still opportunity out there. I think that I don't think that this is something that we can brush off at this point. I think Sonoma's fortunate to be such a successful city. I know that other cities with urban growth boundaries have similar situations where it ends up with concentrated wealth and we just end up pushing everybody out. And then we can't sit inside our boundary and then, you know, say, oh, well, we don't have homeless people. It's because we created a situation that people can't live in. So I think that we should keep going down this path. You know, at the very least, we could start off with like a, you know, micro pilot program of a couple spots and, you know, see if the world ends like some people think it's going to. But I support going forward, and I think that there's more information to gather, and I think that at some point there has to be, you know, a collaboration to see if some solution can be found, because I think that the solution might still be there.
Okay, Madeline?
Well, Kathy, nobody knows how hard you all work, honestly. I worked with Shelter Network in San Mateo County, so I understand, you know, your plight. It's interesting because initially your mission was something else. Now it's exploded. It's exploded into showers, it's exploded into food, it's exploded possibly into vouchers for people. I don't know why anybody would get a voucher here in the valley. It's so expensive, so they have to have transportation possibly to go somewhere else, not here. It certainly isn't here. So, you know, it's just that your mission is very different now. And I know you've been looking for a place for women and children, and I would imagine because of what's going on, this immediacy of this issue of parking, that's probably sitting somewhere. And that's really something very important. One of the things I'm excited about is the mayor and I some time ago spoke to people at Legal Aid, and we feel, as people have asked about immediate solutions, and really we believe those are some of the immediate solutions for people because they can actually stop evictions. And now, I mean, you know, those things are very important. But I think that what you do is very different from what you all started out to do with your predecessor. It was a different type of a program. And maybe that's something that needs to be part of the discussion, because people are all, you know, the police are constantly clearing people out of the creeks. That's what they've said. And I know there are people here in Sonoma County who have addiction issues, who are mentally ill. And that's one of my pet peeves with the issue of mental illness and homeless, because nobody feels strong enough to deal with Laura's Law. Because obviously if a person is mentally ill, how can they say, I'm not a danger to myself or anyone else? It needs to go a step further. And that's where our responsibility as civic people needs to be. So, you know, I'm saying to David and Gary, I wish you well, but you know, your organization has just exploded for obvious reasons. And it's very different from what it was meant to be, and I don't think the city is just ready to understand that. And it doesn't help in any way for the people who are actually homeless. And you know, I don't have an answer, but 5 parking places, you know, is not going to take care of it. And but I certainly support anything they can do. I think we need to lean on the Archdiocese. I don't know if they own property here. I have no idea. But, you know, obviously your other issue is transportation. How do we get people to transportation? to take them to those places. So I don't know what I could say. I will say I support you in the 5 parking spaces, but I just don't know how that's gonna work, because SOS/Haven is a whole new organization. And it's no fault of your own, you're trying to fill a need. So, thank you.
Gary, I think do you wanna weigh in further?
I guess, the temperature was what, 97 today? A couple of months from now, it's gonna start chilling down and so on. And I don't know if I can do enough research to make a difference with the council, but, I'd like to have, I've only had 2.5 weeks since our last meeting, but, if I can do some work in the next, and it'd be anybody who wants to help, I'm gonna do it anyway, just to learn more about the issue and see what I can do to make a difference with my connections with the food bank and otherwise. But, I would like to maybe continue the conversation if we can come back before it gets cold, because we're still gonna have the issue when it gets cold. At least there's an opportunity that people aren't gonna, to freeze to death. And see what we can do to bring up some other possibilities, talk to other organizations. The Rotary Club, we raise money for fish to feed people. There's all kinds of things, and my mind's just thinking about how can we go find spots and places and other organizations, and maybe get everybody together, not just politicians, but get people that can get get some things done. And I'll reach back out to the executive director and the board of the food bank to get ideas and get a bigger group of people to help me think about how to get through it. But I think the first thing I definitely want to meet with the council people in Santa Rosa. I serve on David Gouen was the acting city manager in Santa Rosa for a little while. I'm not sure what his exact title is, but he's a very good resource for me as well. He even asked me to go find affordable housing folks from outside of the area to come into Santa Rosa, which is a pretty good sign, because maybe we just don't have the right thought or idea here. But I'd like to have a little more time to think about it rather than just saying, we're going to shelve it. Anyhow. Thank you.
Councilmember Cook.
Yeah, and I think that that's how I ended my speech, was that we should, at the council level, we went to the facilities, and that was Gary and I. I would recommend that the council pick 2 council members to look into a possible partnership. I was prepared tonight, and I'm rereading this. What we need to do is we need to give direction back to city staff about the 5 parking spots. And I feel it's very unfair to the Haven if we keep them going along, and unless the council members are actually still undecided about the 5 parking spots, because that's the issue that I think is at hand right now. The long term is the city of Sonoma partnering with the county agencies, because I know that in the facilities committee meeting, they were talking about one site that if it could open up by Pythian, it's a huge complex. It's bigger than the city of Sonoma, big government building. And that is where I'm saying tonight that I'm not pushing the can down the road. I'm just saying the spot that in front of the Haven doesn't seem to be working. But I think the city of Sonoma, one thing that we do have is we have the clout to go out and try to help what the mission is, and have the SOS over here doing their transitional housing, what it was designed for and what the mission statement is, and move forward to try to help our citizens that like I said, homelessness does not have a jurisdiction. So I'm not gonna just say that the city of Sonoma needs to take care of their own. We need to take care of everyone. So I would recommend to the council to have 2 members. I mean, I would even be part of that if council wanted. But take a look at. But I would really like to get a straw vote tonight, because this would have to go to the Planning Commission. This would have to, have a major ordinance change, and this will take a lot of time. So I think that, not that we have to make a decision tonight, but I would just like to see the feeling of how my colleagues feel exactly on the 5 parking spots.
I really feel that still there's not enough information on the ground running for me to be making an informed decision. I feel that we're working on this. I feel that there's an interfaith community here that has not been tapped and has not been talked to. And to be perfectly honest with you, I looked at the contract for Catholic Charities. It's talking about private organizations. It would be churches. I mean, are we able to go ahead and see if there is a cohort that we can put together here on a private property basis versus having a public street or public parking being the main designation for the spaces? I have concerns for both the homeless in the cars and for the women or men who may be staffing the Haven. Somehow I do not feel that going ahead and having electric cords coming out of the Haven, generating equipment in a car is not my vision of what I see a complete program. Strike Force Housing, which is what they use when you go to do forest fires or whatever, is a big, huge van. It's got bunks and it's got some other things, all right? That's never even been incorporated in this idea here, all right? What I'm saying is that there are a lot more organizations that have boots on the ground that might be able to solve this particular issue on a regional level that we have not even discussed with. And as compassionate as every single one of you are in the Haven, and as compassionate as the side of me is in supporting you throughout the many years that you have been in existence, I do not know that I have the answer at this point that I can support for the benefit of both the homeless and the residents of our community. The fact that we're so driven on this time sequence of trying to find this, no, this is not something that I see as overnight, made in 2 weeks, made in a month. The situation wasn't made in 2 weeks and made in a month. It's not going to resolve itself in 2 weeks or a month or even a year. And when you're asking to rewind something that has been in existence for that many years with a complete constituency of a city, I think it deserves a little bit more public input than just these particular sessions. And I think the public can't make an informed decision because I don't feel I have enough information to make an informed decision. So before we go ahead and start unwinding something that we have had for very specific reasons, why was the ordinance generated? Are you going to see RVs on the plaza? Are you going to see people living in RVs in the plaza? I mean, there's all sorts of consequences that have not even been discussed that are unintended by this. And if this is a business, if this was a nonprofit only, but we are involving local government. And local government studies and plans and then delivers. So that's what I'm asking for. I have perfect confidence in our facility group here with Councilmember Cook and Councilmember Edwards to continue with their particular meetings and what they might find. Anything you could find in your next meeting with Catholic Charities or your council members in Santa Rosa might go ahead and give me sufficient information to make a judgment. I do not have that here tonight. So my vote would be to seek and get more information and come back. And this might be an August issue. But I would rather take the time to study it and study it well than not to study it all. I just don't feel I have enough information to make that decision. It's too precious. It is too insightful. It is too wanting for the homeless for us not to do due diligence. That's where I am on the issue. So, council members, do we have any consensus here? Do they continue as a facilities committee and gain more information, or does it stop here tonight?
I would suggest that they do continue as a facilities committee. And my support for the 5 spaces is really spiritual, and hope that it brings good luck to you all, because I know you're up against a lot. And I know, Kathy, you come from a royal family from where I used to live. So you're probably not used to not getting your way. So that's all.
Councilmember Hundley.
I support if it's the facilities committee or whoever it is, gathering more intel, but in a more specific and intentional way of addressing specific problems. Because so far it's just all these, fears are getting thrown up in the air, but I want to see someone actually, start to address them. Theories about is it going to draw more cars than there are spaces and they're going to park on the street? Perhaps that question can be answered by talking to other programs. But I think that eventually, I think that there needs to be a real meeting between SOS, police chief, city staff, perhaps facilities committee, or Gary, or whoever, and to actually see if the lists can be combined, because I just don't want to sort of open-end push it down and say we don't have enough information. I think that we can work towards affirmatively saying, we have these problems, we can't address them, the answer's no, or we have these problems, we have solutions to all of them, the neighbors aren't going to hate it, and then we can have it. So I would like to keep moving in that direction. Can't say what the time frame's going to be, and yeah, I think at the very least, as far as pilot programs go, I don't see particularly what adding a couple spaces and just gauging it, giving it a few months. If it's a terrible idea, pull the plug, work on something else. But at this point, turning something down and not having another solution, it just seems really unbalanced. It's like a group is trying to do something, and if we're going to say no, then we need to already have something in our hand.
Okay, and Councilmember Edwards.
So when I went to visit, David and I, we tried to coordinate, but we just couldn't pull it together. So it would have been great to have another set of eyes, and we will again if the council decides they want to do that. But Matthew, the young man we met at our facilities meeting, just with the amount of time, I didn't get enough time to actually go on an evening run and go actually to these sites and have a look at them. And that's something I committed to him that I'm going to do either way as I learn more about the situation. But I want to see for myself, and speaking with Supervisor Gorin today on the folks that are at PRMD, she said there's only a few cars there, but I want to go see for myself what there actually is and how that's working, because they basically say they don't even really notice it, but I need to see it for myself. So I would like to have the time just to figure. I can't do it overnight, but I'll do my best to work with Councilmember Cook to go make these visits, and I'm interested in it now. It's caught me. So anyhow.
So Carol, if I could just interject here, it seems to me that we kind of would like maybe the facilities committee to go back and maybe kind of devise a plan of action. Determine if there's going to be interviews, who's going to do it, so forth and so on, and give council a report back. And do you think it's feasible? I mean, we have the two gentlemen up here now. Do you think it's feasible that we could have that by our August 15th meeting? Or is that our date in August?
Well, I think we could tentatively target that. I mean, it's, again, it's going to
Depend on time.
depend on timing and schedules. I think that we can set that as a target date, and, you know, if not, it moves into September, I think, you know. Again, because, you know, we go dark in August, and Facilities Committee, like all the rest of you, the members may have plans as well. So,
Right.
you know, we'll do the best we can. We'll tentatively, you know, target a report out on August 15th, but if not, we will bump it to a September meeting as the next report out.
Right. Is that satisfactory among council members?
Yeah, I would prefer September, just based on, I mean, we're almost there. We're
Yeah.
almost in August,
Yeah.
so.
All right, so if we go ahead and
Report out in September.
report out in September?
And I'll coordinate with the facilities.
Right, and then maybe some of the recommendations that council members have said today could be part of some actions for the future as well. All right, is everyone in agreement with that? All right, well then, I think we have our action and our direction until September. Thank you very much for coming and bearing with us for this meeting. So, we have regular calendar, city council as the successor agency. We have no items for that. We then move on to council members' reports and comments. Do we have any council members with comments or reports?
I do. I attended the Sonoma County Waste Management Agency, and the good news is there was only one holdout city, which is Rohnert Park. While they can't promise a vote to extend the JPA, at that point couldn't promise, there was a feeling that Rohnert Park will be voting in favor of extending the JPA. And the reason why it's so important is because we have contracts that we're dealing with, and you can't give people 6-month contracts because we don't know where we're going to be. And so I think that's a real, you know, a very positive move. Thank you.
Anyone else have any report outs or whatever? Okay. I went to the, I had a meeting of the Marin Sonoma Mosquito and Vector Control District. Have had many meetings. They passed their environmental impact report, which is for, you know, the district itself. Was a very lengthy document. You know, supposedly, you know, it's about this thick and goes with all the regulations and what they use and everything else. And had an incredible presentation by a toxicologist talking about different things to do with the environment. And it was very thorough and certainly a document to understand. There have been many requests. If you are here in Sonoma, no doubt when it gets to dusk, you are closing up everything that's open because you do not want mosquitoes in your house. They are quite active, and their calls and requests are up 150% at this point. So again, look towards their particular, their website, their updates on the Zika virus, the Zika virus mosquito, and also the dengue fever mosquito, which is actually probably on the public health list higher ranked than the Zika virus at this point. But we are going to have the Summer Olympics happening soon. People are going to be traveling, so I would definitely check in with a public health official if you have any concerns in that respect. Sonoma County Transportation Authority and Regional Climate Protection Authority met. We talked about many issues. Went ahead and talked about offerings for programs. There has been in the second funding for the One Bay area. There was a presentation up in Santa Rosa, so we will meet again in August. We have July off, so I will not have a meeting for that. And just am having a wonderful time meeting with so many different people in Sonoma. And I think the greatest thing that I love to do is to walk into City Hall and see a tourist there and say, where are you from and what are you doing today? And it's just a fabulous, fabulous thing. They just love Sonoma. They love our tourism ambassadors that are over at the Visitors Bureau. So good job. I think we're definitely on the right track. Last comment is, happy 4th of July. For those who will not be at the parade, just want to go ahead and shout out that this is Sonoma's finest. I hope you are all not walking but running to place your donations at the fire department for the fireworks, because they are situation critical in meeting not this year's deadline but next year's funding deadline for the fireworks. Every dollar counts, and they are so wonderful, and it's just a great way of saying how you appreciate them and the fireworks that they do for 4th of July. Everyone wants to be near a fireman on that date. So I just wanted to remind everyone that please be safe, and we'll be back on July 6th, I think, is our meeting, because the 4th of July is on a Monday, so we'll be meeting that Wednesday. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to city manager comments and announcements.
Could I have one last comment? I forgot.
Oh, well, of course.
Thank you. And if anyone's listening out there, possibly you're all asleep, but I'm working with the firefighters to get volunteers to help clean up after the celebration on July 5th at 7 a.m. We've had volunteers from the Hannah Center, also Boys and Girl Scouts. So we're looking for volunteers 7 a.m. to about 10 o'clock. They serve refreshments at 7. You have all the wonderful equipment to pick up all the things that people leave, and there isn't much, so it's great. But I encourage everyone to come out to in front of General Vallejo's house. You'll see the fire trucks. Thank you.
I will tell you, on an exercise program, this is just the best morning you could ever have. I have done this on many years, and I will tell you that you definitely say, okay, it's time for swimming afterwards. There is everything out there in that field. I also just wanted to come back and say that Alcalde Garcia has asked us if he can walk with us as the Alcalde for the city for 4th of July. So I just wanted to announce to him, he's rather anxious that he be included with the group, that I have said that that is fine, all right, with us. So with that, city manager.
A couple quick announcements. We still have the opening for the Sonoma County Library Commission. So we've extended the application period, so we will accept applications until 5 p.m. on Friday, July 15th. And so if we don't receive any application, the position will just continue to remain unfilled. So anyone's interested, please see Gay. And it is a 4-year term beginning August 1st. Secondly, we have completed our city clerk executive assistant recruitment. We had interviews. We interviewed our top 4 candidates last Wednesday. We had 14 applications altogether, very qualified applicants that we interviewed. Thank you, Mayor Gallion, for joining us in our interview panel, and I will be doing final interviews of the top 2 candidates, and we anticipate that our new city clerk, who will have huge shoes to fill, as we wish Gay well, not right away, but eventually we will wish her well in her retirement. We anticipate our new city clerk will be here at the end of August. So very qualified candidates, so we were fortunate. And lastly, just a note on the administrative guidelines that were brought up under council or public comment for the mobile home ordinance. Under the ordinance, it is the charge that the city manager will work with the city attorney on those guidelines and bring those forward for city council approval. So the city attorney and I will be working on those and bring those forward to you likely in the fall. So that is on the city attorney and myself's work list, task list. So just wanted to let you know that we will be working on those.
Thank you very much. Is there, with that, I will go ahead and ask someone if they wish to speak on public comment and open the public comment section. Seeing no one rise to the podium, I will go ahead and close public comment and adjourn for this evening. Thank you.